In the first scene, a futuristic train carrying a team of elite fighters on a mission is seen speeding through the train tracks on the moon at very high speeds. Throughout the journey, the fighters mind their business as they all wait quietly to reach civilization on the moon, with some operating holographic computers and others getting their rest. One of them, our MC, Jack Shadow, hums a tune to cure his boredom, and even when he's asked how he knows the song, he says he's not sure. Anyway, soon enough, they pass the criminal checkpoint on the highway, and almost immediately, the train's operator receives a terror alert message and informs all the fighters to get ready for a fight. As the criminals attack the train, Jack and his colleagues spring into fight mode and subdue as many robotic criminals as possible to keep their train from derailing. Soon, the robots on top of the train start hacking into the train's operational system, and the operator immediately informs Reese of the risk of them derailing. With no time to waste, she dishes out instructions to the others to protect the train at all costs, and both Jack and Duan bust out of the train to keep the robotic fingers off the train's terminal. When he gets on top of the train, Jack uses the engraving technology fitted on his suit to create a plasma gun, which he uses to shoot down many of the robots flying after the train. Unable to provide an accurate number of the enemies out there, the operator lets the fighters know it's a kill or be killed situation. So, Duan, Jorg, and Reese all work together to destroy all robots that damage the train. In time, Reese gets on top of the train and joins Jack to face all the robots surrounding them. By choosing to forget all worries and focus on the fight in front of him, Jack amps up his engraving and soon goes full force on these bozo robots. Before the continuation of the main story, a flashback is shown to explain the string of events that led to the war-filled future between the Earth and the Moon. Around a year before the train track incident, an unfazed Jacob Shadow is seen lying on the grass in his house garden, recalling a traumatic experience he had back when he was younger. Apparently, he used to have a friend named Phil and would often play with the dude in a weird facility they were both in. In his memory, he realizes the last memory he has of Phil is back when the guy sacrificed himself to make sure Jack made it out of the burning facility alive. Eventually, the reminiscing ends, and Jack gets up, remembering they're having meatloaf for dinner, and drives his supercar to the team's meeting place in Los Angeles, all while listening to the news about the moon's capital city, Copernicus, hosting a soccer parade and whatnot. When he finally gets there, his butler, Harry, hurriedly welcomes him home, and Jack gets into the house to meet a very angry Reese, scolding him for being late to their meeting. Jack, who's uninterested in her, throws her a drink, ignores her, and moves on to talk to Jorg, Michaela, and Eric, whom he asks about his progress in a particular game they're playing. In time, he asks Reese why she's there, seeing as it's Labor Day, and Reese throws an even bigger tantrum as she gets worried sick about the ship leaving without them. To help keep her blood pressure normal, Jack and his friends fly to the cruise ship using the family chopper and soon get to join everyone having a good time there. Soon after, the orbital shaft, which the Shadow Corporation is about to launch, gets prepared to be launched, and soon enough, the event begins as soon as the cruise ship is docked to the shaft. At the start of the event, Jack's mother hosts the audience and starts the speech by mentioning all the good things the unified AI system, Sapientia, has done since its creation. On a final note, she slowly eases into the moon exploration project, as well as this being the 40th orbital shaft they'll be creating. Upon introducing the launch, Jack's mother does something dramatic as she tries to introduce her son to the general public, only to figure out that he's no longer in his seat. As it turns out, Jack snuck out to gamble and have fun in the casino with Ozma and Jorg. As they rack up their coins, the duo teases Ozma, whom they believe to be uptight, and even dash him a girl to spend his winnings on. Ozma gets to feel the touch of a woman again, but before Jack's happiness lasts, Reese shows up, seething in rage and anger, and pulls Jack to the side to ask him what his plans are because she just can't understand why he's not taking his life seriously. At first, Jack tries to sidestep the question, but eventually, Reese gets tired of him again, and just leaves after reminding the bozo to give his mother the gift he bought for her. Soon, Jack also leaves for their private apartment on the cruise ship, and runs into his father on the way to the dining room. After the small talk, Jack's father advises him on his life decisions and then warns him to take Reese seriously, as she could be a good wife for him someday. When they get to the dining room, they smell the meatloaf and instantly get hungry to munch on it. Sadly, they find Jack's mother, Mona, drunk and spouting nonsense about Jack leaving the event midway and him being with Reese and whatnot. When she starts insinuating that Jack and Reese slept with each other, Jack's father just pulls her aside and walks her to the bed. Before leaving, however, the man asks Jack if he's that worried about being adopted, seeing as he's usually carefree with his life, but then Jack tells him that he just doesn't think he's cut out for whatever they need him for. Hearing this, Jack's father tells him not to think about what other people say and just trust in them, his parents, to give him the best life possible. Around this time, Mona gets worse, and Jack's father is forced to leave. A few minutes before midnight, Reese finds Jack by the deck of the cruise ship, staring at the gift he bought for his mom's birthday, and asks if he's man enough to give it to her this year. As he replies, yes, Jorg, Eric, and Ozma all show up behind them, gisting about the sheer amount of money Goody Two-Shoes Ozma has lost that night and throughout the year in total. In his defense, Ozma tries to blame Sapientia for his losses, claiming that it'll help humanity, but everyone there knows that it's bullshit. Eventually, when the midnight clock hits, the fleet of cruise ships goes lights out, and all passengers have their sights set on the 40th orbital shaft's launch, as the power supplied from the moon brings the systems to life. Suddenly, a series of bright golden lights shines around the base of the orbital shaft and into the sky, leaving the spectators, including Jack and his buddies, stunned. For a few moments, Everything appears to be normal, but just then, the lights suddenly go out all around Earth, and before Jack or anybody could figure out what's happening, Jack gets hacked. Unable to do shit about the hack, Jack finds himself getting pulled into a cosmic holographic space where he finds his long-lost buddy, Phil, inching dangerously close to him. Just as the guy is about to touch him, the whole space turns red, and suddenly, something starts pulling Phil back where he came from. Before disappearing out of sight, Phil urges his buddy, Jack, to lend him his strength, so he can use it to fight for the moon, and then disappears. When Jack finally comes to, he finds himself muttering Phil's name to his buddies, who ask him what the matter is. With no time to waste, Jack ignores his buddies and rushes back up to the deck to stare at the blacked-out orbital shaft. Very soon, some cyan-colored lights flash around the orbital shaft, and Jack, who knows trouble's coming, pulls Rhys and his friends, who are so confused, out of harm's way. Seconds after the flashing occurs, a large explosion occurs in the sky, and soon enough, it reaches the orbital shaft and the cruise ships around it. What was supposed to be a peaceful launch night soon turns into a night of chaos and pandemonium as the burning, falling debris from the sky starts destroying ships and knocking people, including Jorg, out. Considering the situation he's in, Jack makes a move to go save anybody he can find, but Ozma, unable to let his friend walk into death, stops him and throws him, Rhys, Eric, and Jorg into an escape submarine, which he closes just right before the orbital shaft's head falls into the water, causing the final explosion that destroys the cruise ships. With Jack and some of his buddies getting off the cruise ship safely, Jack stares out the window and watches a huge pile of debris crash into his mother and father's cruise ship, causing them their untimely deaths. Around this time, on the moon, there's a massive protest by the moon's citizens against Earth's interference in their lives. Soon enough, the leader of the rebellious moon group, Bob Skylum, aka the Moon's Devil, appears to everyone, including those on Earth, to send a holographic message to the people of the Earth and Moon, claiming responsibility for the collapse of the 40th orbital shaft and vowing to never again allow Earthlings to continually colonize and terrorize them. As he's about to end the message, he declares that moment to be the moment of independence on the moon, and then has the entire moon populace chanting the name of his terrorist organization, Moonrise. By the time his message ends, a certain lady is seen chilling and staring at the holographic message, as if waiting for something to happen the next minute. A few hours after the explosion, Jack is rushed to a nearby hospital for immediate medical care. Thankfully, he manages to regain consciousness soon after, but when he wakes up, he instantly leaves his hospital bed and the gift he bought for his mom's birthday and rushes out of his room to search for his friends, right after seeing the extent of the explosion's damage. On his way, he finds a staff member and asks if any other person was brought in besides him, but unfortunately, the staff says he's the only one they've seen so far. Hearing this, Jack strolls the hospital grounds and finds several dozen people wounded and receiving urgent medical care. At this point, he knows his Los Angeles home would be gone for good. On his way home, he recalls what the staff told him about even Sapientia not knowing about the status of his people, but remains hopeful. When he finally gets home, he grabs a drink, and while in an arm sling, tries to contact everybody he's affiliated with, his friends included, but unfortunately, he can't connect to anybody. After a quick recollection of the incident and the last looks on his parents' faces, Jack tries to contact his buddies again, especially Rhys and Eric, but still, to no avail. Tired of failing, he accidentally spills his drink and pulls up a holographic screen to listen to the news. There, he re-listens to the message from the Moon Devil from 9 days ago, and figures out just how chaotic the situation is at the moment. Before he gets to listen to the rest of the news, two men in black suits show up with his mother's gift and take him. As it turns out, the Joint Army suspects him of assisting the Moon Devil in his act of terrorism on Los Angeles soil, and also with the orbital shaft attack. Currently, it's said that the dude would be held in the Joint Army HQ in Nevada for further investigation, and then taken to trial once evidence is found. So, without knowing it, Jack gets driven to the facility hidden deep in the desert and thrown in a detention cell so he can wait till the person in charge shows up. Confused over why he's being detained, Jack struggles with his handcuffs and asks them to tell him why he's being treated like a criminal. At this point, the men, who've been holding their anger in, accuse him of being the person suspected to be behind the joint terrorist attack and beat him up. As soon as they leave, Jack tries to remind them that he's the Jacob Shadow they all know and hate, but nobody does anything. Around this time, Rhys, posing as the psychological assessment personnel and lawyer for Jack, shows up with her assistant at the facility to do a psychological analysis on her buddy. As she and her colleague walk toward the holding cell, Rhys asks the man to buy her as much time as he can so she can get the full gist from Jack, and the man promises to try his best. As soon as she gets into Jack's holding cell, she prohibits him from any physical contact and states the charges put out against him, noting that the Joint Army is currently trying to prove that he's a criminal. Knowing that she's correct, Jack tells that he got hacked by someone and that it isn't his fault, but then Rhys tells him that the Joint Army will pass his judgment based on a comprehensive review of what he and the people around him remember on the fateful night of the attack. When Jack throws another tantrum, Rhys breaks yet another bad news to him. It appears that his genetic screening had been falsified way back before he was adopted, making him look even more guilty in the face of the law. At this point, Rhys tells him that even though it appears his parents don't know about this, there's a possibility that his genes mutated at some point in his his life after his adoption. With this said, Reese reminds him that she's just grasping at straws and doesn't know the full gist yet. Seeing as she can still intervene in the case at this stage, she begs Jack to trust in her and tell her everything she needs to know so she can defend him. Although Jack tells her that he didn't have any part to play in the terrorist attack, he still knows the man who claims to be Bob Skylum, as he was once raised by that before he was adopted. If anything, he tells Reese that he spent his childhood in a weird facility, and although she was a bit shocked to hear this, she still calmly listens to what he has to say. So, Jack's childhood story begins on a random day when he was woken up by Bob Skylum, who happened to be his handler back then. Each time little Jack woke up, Bob would always ask him if he liked the world he was in, and Jack would say yes every single time. So, on this particular morning, Jack was no different as he jerked awake once he noticed he was late and quickly rushed to the assessment room with his buddy, Phil, to conduct their final assignment. After doing his best to speed things up and finish first, Jack still manages to lose to Phil yet again. Realizing this, he throws a tantrum, and then, while running to the cafeteria, asks Phil why he was late to bed the previous night. Unable to tell him anything now, Phil promises to explain everything better by nightfall, and then joins his junior colleagues and plays with them in the cafeteria before eating. Thereafter, Bob Skylum, a man whom they all called father, shows up and motivates them to keep doing their best so they can one day become revolutionaries in the moon's future. Just as he's about to leave, one of them, Sophie, jumps at him and begs him to stay with them for the day. Sadly, Bob can't do that, so he leaves them all with Phil and leaves for a weird room that only Phil notices. Later that day, while Phil and Jack are chilling out with the others on the moon's grounds, Phil suddenly gets curious and asks his buddy, Jack, if he knows how long they're going to keep staying in that facility, and also about the moon revolution stuff Bob keeps talking about. Before Jack can answer, someone calls them both to remind them it's time to return to the facility. With their conversation cut short, the duo gets back to the degassing chamber to get cleaned up before going to bed. An hour after lights out, Jack steals and drinks a carton of milk, but then finds his friend Phil staring at a big black door that only their father could ever use, and joins him. Back then, Jack never questioned or wondered why they were prohibited from using such a door, as he always thought it to be normal, even though they were made to play freely. Anyway, by midnight, Phil and Jack stayed up and listened to the familiar hum that Jack was playing in the beginning on a small radio Phil had. According to the older Jack, who's narrating the story, they were happy and had no worries at all, but in a minute, everything changed for the worse. Still, in the flashback, little Jack reminds Phil about what he wanted to tell him earlier in the morning, but before Phil could say a thing, an explosion happens in the facility, and the boys rush outside to check it out. Oddly enough, Phil finds the big black forbidden door open and somehow forces Jack, who's a little hesitant, to pass through it. Upon running a few meters through the corridor, they find a room they've never seen before, and inside that room, there's a big red hole that leads directly outside their facility onto the moon grounds. Soon after, they find a gun on the floor and check Sophie, who's buried beneath a body, only for them to realize that she was never human but a robot all along. As reality dawns on them, their supposed father, Bob Skylum, shows up, cuts Jack's right arm for absolutely no reason, and goes mad when Phil tries to figure out his endgame. In time, Bob abandons the kids and heads out of the facility in his crazy moment. Eventually, the boys manage to walk towards the exit of the facility for survival, but while on their way there, Phil assures Jack that he now knows that the world they've been living in so far was all a lie. Before leaving, however, Phil pins Jack against the door, slices off his arm, and has his robot assistant attach it to Jack's severed right hand. After urging his buddy to make sure to survive for him, Phil disappears, and that's the last time Jack ever sees him, as he alone escapes the terrible accident. Upon landing on Earth the next day, Jack is found near the ocean bank by a couple who save and adopt him into their care a few months later. Everything that's happened after that is pretty much self-explanatory, but as the current Jack finishes his story, his Prosecutor Landry, enters the detention cell and has the men in suits haul Jack into his custody for safekeeping till Sapientia decides on his trial. Before he leaves, though, Landry tells him he's authorizing another genetic screening on Jack, seeing as his genetic information has been skillfully tampered with. Scared they might find something they're not supposed to, Jack throws a fit but is soon restrained by the armed men in suits. About a year after his detention, Jack goes on a mission undercover to the moon's most populated city, Copernicus, to investigate the rebel group stationed there. On their way up to the moon through the orbital shaft, Reese warns him not to do anything that'll raise suspicion, but then Jack jokes around again, making Reese super pissed at the doofus and throwing yet another fit. Eventually, Jack gets serious and promises he'll behave this time around, and the duo gets into an argument over what Reese will do once they order his execution. In time, the other members of the crew advise Inanna to just ignore the bozos and continue her briefing. As the VC-3 Reconnaissance Assault Unit, Inanna informs everyone that their main mission, for the most part, is to infiltrate the terrorist organization, Moonrise, and eliminate Bob Skylum, the leader of the rebellion. So far, Jorg mentions something about Sapientia not reaching some parts of the Undercity, but then Inanna corrects him, telling them that if the AI unification system could find the exact location of the Moonrise Army's hideout, then they won't be needed. For now, though, She and Rhys mention that the Joint Army sent a first task force to set up a search base around Copernicus City, and they're to meet with them as soon as they touch down. After mentioning several of their suspected hiding blocks, the task force approached the landing dock on the moon's orbital shaft, clearly unsure of what to find there. While the VC-3 assault unit makes its approach to the moon's orbital shaft, Bob Skylum, who was summoned earlier to the main gate, mobilizes his troops to launch an attack on Copernicus City's nerve center. As soon as he successfully suppresses and infiltrates the complex network keeping the city of Copernicus together, Bob's subordinates do their best to hack into Unit 5 to ensure they secure the space and get whatever they came there for. While they're at it, Bob, the man himself, armed with an artificial E2 material hand, walks into the control room, violating every safety program put in place to keep the control room out of hackers and terrorists, and faces the fatso in charge of keeping the facility running. Upon having his hackers turn off the emergency alarm system for the control room, Bob forces the boss up and accesses the mainframe database of the control room using his artificial arm to see what Copernicus City has been up to. After fiddling with their systems for a few minutes, he is impressed by what he finds there. So far, the man in front of him is competent enough to take the protection of the city very seriously, and Bob makes the man know how amazing his defense systems are. Sadly, the man's an arrogant piece of so he brags about him being handpicked by the AI, Sapientia, to lead the Copernicus's nerve center, as well as having sole control rights over the system. Irritated by the man's yapping, Bob Skylum blows his freaking brains off and continues stealing information on the city. About an hour later, Rhys's team finds out about the Moonrise infiltration, and instantly gets worried about their landing strategy. Seeing as the city's orbital shaft has been compromised and their mission must remain, Rhys and Zoan, Inanna's sister, quickly discover a railway system that leads to the Copernicus's undercity, so they both decide to abandon their main route to take the other one. Just then, Jack screams his lungs out over losing a game, and, despite Eric's warnings about them being discovered over a pirate network, he assures him that everything's fine. Eventually, the Moonchain airspace radar detects them and orders them to identify themselves before they're allowed to land, meaning they just got faced by the dumbest in the group. With no time to point fingers, Rhys orders her men to stay sharp and prepare for a confrontation with the Copernicus forces amidst the chaos plaguing them. With that said, she notions to Zoan and urges her to get ready to rumble, and almost immediately, Zoan pilots the ship towards the base, causing the captain and his crew to take them as a threat. Just as the captain's about to dish out instructions to all personnel on the base, Zoan hijacks their signal, blocking communication, and then buys the others enough time to silently infiltrate the orbital shaft's base and knock out as many soldiers as possible. Jack gets dibs on being the first to take down the smallest fries. Once he's done, he gives the others the signal, and, soon enough, Zoan lands their jet on the orbital shaft unnoticed. Elsewhere, Bob and his group of mercenaries are seen chilling after finally infiltrating and harvesting enough energy to activate something they call the L-Zone from the nerve center. With this much energy, Doctor, aka the most boring lady in the group, notes that they may just be able to turn the tide of war on the moon in their favor. Tired of her rambling, the Wild One, another lady mercenary in the group, yaps about eating out, but soon stops her yap when she receives information from someone about the communications failure at one of their outposts. Although it's back to normal, she still feels they should send drones to check the space out just to be sure they're not being infiltrated, and this leaves Bob at an impasse. Meanwhile, Jack and his VC-3 colleagues visit the nerve center right after landing to check their systems for possible train routes they can take to Copernicus's undercity. While Zoan works on figuring out the train route, Duan leaves Jack to check something out, and Eric is seen being overly cautious over the insanely silent environment. Mere seconds later, an unmanned enemy attack fleet approaches the base, alerting the VC-3 assault team to leave their ship, and forcing them to retreat and rendezvous at Point Charlie, since Zoan's unable to hack into them. Soon after they land, dozens of attack robots spread out to cover exits and surround the intruders. When Jack finds out from Eric that they've been ordered to abandon ship, he stops and tries to get Eric to follow him so they can get the ship. As he finishes his sentence, the robots attack him, eventually causing Jack and Jorg to act as decoys to the robots so Eric and Duan can figure out an escape route. With Eric and Duan gone, Jack and Jorg focus on keeping the attack robots at bay, clearly not knowing that Bob Skylum and his right-hand man, Harbinger, were just meters away, watching the fight and figuring out who they are. When the duo notices the boys using engraving technology, Bob gets interested in fighting them, so he asks Harbinger for help. Just when Jorg and Jack were about to escape after beating down the robots, a large structure gets hauled their way and lands beside them. Before they can figure out what it is, the structure explodes in their faces, separating them from each other, and soon, Bob Skylum gets beside Jack and challenges him to a duel. Upon realizing the true identity of the facing him, Jack creates some guns with his engraving tech and does his best to land a fatal shot on the most notorious terrorist ever, only for Bob to block all his shots like they're nothing. Still, Jack refuses to give up as he keeps on firing as many shots as he can, all while reloading as skillfully as possible. In time, Rhys sees Jack's stress levels and quickly begs Jorg to stop him before he kills himself. Moments before Jorg steps in to save him, Jack finds himself in an arm lock with Bob's prosthetic hand after trying to stab him with his engraved knife. Soon enough, Bob uses the same engraving to not only deactivate Jack's engraving, but also put him in a threatening devastating position that might make him end up dead. Thankfully, just as the criminal's about to blow Jack's head off, just like the nerve center manager, Jorg swoops in and gets Jack out of the way in the nick of time. Realizing they need a distraction, Jorg throws a smoke grenade to mask their movements and then makes a run for their ship with Jack. Upon finding them, Bob has the robots fire shots at the ship to crash it, with one even firing rocket launchers. But fortunately for the boys, they manage to get the ship out of the loading dock in time before they get blown to smithereens. Just when they thought they were out of trouble, Bob hits their ship with a death ray gun blast and has them falling back down at insane speeds. However, before they hit the ground, Jorg pulls the yoke up and levels the ship before eventually crashing it into the mountain nearby. Satisfied with the results of his test, Bob returns to his ship and orders one of his people, Wisby, to help him out with something. Moments after the crash, Jorg and Jack join the others in the secret train that the others were traveling in, and Jack throws a fit over his failure to subdue Bob this time. Understanding his pain, Jorg urges him to calm the hell down, as he was going to die anyway if he didn't come to save him. With that, Jack calms down and travels in silence for the rest of the journey. Eventually, they get to Copernicus's Undercity and disguise themselves as normal civilians to blend in. While riding a cable car to their contact's location, the group gets to talk about the subpar state of the entire place, most especially the insanely high levels of radiation they're seeing, and wonder if it's like that because of the recent orbital shaft collapse. With no response in sight, they all chill out till they get to their destination and alight their ride. While trekking towards a nearby bar, Jack is stopped by a random little girl on the street who tells him he smells just like her big brother, and he just ignores her to join the rest of his colleagues in the bar. There, they all chill out separately like normal people to avoid suspicion. But then Reese leaves the gambling space to complain about Jorg, and the others shouting like fools in the gambling den to Jack, who's just chilling on the balcony. Once they get past the small talk, Reese talks about their contact being late for their meeting, but then Jack says that they're probably taking extra precautions to avoid being caught, which is quite the best thing to do. Reese agrees with him, but then asks him if he's still worried about his fight with Bob the previous day. When Jack says no, Reese calls him out as a liar, but then he tells her that he's being honest. Having seen the man who robbed him of his parents twice face to face, he felt different, and if not for Reese and Jorg, who stopped him, he knows he might have died. Understanding his point, Reese asks if he thinks Phil, his friend, is still alive. While Jack can't say, he still doesn't know if it's Phil he saw the night it all began. As they're about to talk further, a fight breaks out between Zoan and Jorg over him being too generous and whatnot. Eventually, when they break the fight, they attract unwanted attention from the bar's customers. But before anybody calls the cops, a huge man shows up and takes them to the back, where they descend a few levels through an elevator to get to the secret base under the bar. There, Jack gets to see the base commander, Harry Cox, his butler from back in the day, and is reunited with him. Upon welcoming them and telling them about the preventive measures they took to ensure it was them at the bar, Eric decides to call Zoan over, and he gets escorted out of the meeting room. Shortly after, Harry tells the group that he's still officially missing, which is suitable for the mission, but still reveals that the majority of the people who work on this base don't have IDs as well. Again, Jorg asks an out-of-pocket question and Duan lets him know that his dumbness is the reason why Zoan got pissed at him earlier. Just then, there's a massive tremor in the underground base. When Jack realizes that the tremor came from a possible explosion in the bar upstairs, he rushes to the elevator and rides it up, only to get there and find the entire bar in flames, with Eric's burned body peeking out through some debris. In another flashback to the time before the VC-3 fighters left for the moon mission, Reese's group is seen randomly running away from enemy forces, fully equipped with their E2 material suits and weapons, when suddenly, Jack gets hit by an enemy laser and falls to the ground. Soon after the experience, Jack gets a genetic screening to ensure his genetic information is real this time and nothing's falsified. Once he's been cleared as a VC-3 assault fighter, he's escorted by Inanna and 2 prison guards into an elevator, which they all ride down to a certain part of the facility. While on the elevator ride, Jack asks Inanna, who's on a video call with her sister, Zoan, for his current status, and Inanna, after hanging up the call on her angry sister, tells him that his gender and assignment have now been decided. Finally, before they get to the end of the ride, Inanna extends her sympathies for the bozo, leaving him even more confused than he originally was. When they get to the base, Inanna leads him further into the control room filled with screens and informs a huge man, who happens to be standing near Reese, that Jacob Shadow's been detained by them. Hearing this, the man orders his handcuffs to be removed and dismisses the guards. Thereafter, Jack gets to see the looks on everyone's faces, as they all still think of him as a criminal, even though all charges against him have been dropped as per Sapientia's orders. Eventually, they all get past that, and the huge man tells Jack that although his genetic information was falsified to begin with, and the recent genetic screening they did on him has cleared him fit for military operations on the moon, meaning he has type VC-3 genetics, and has already been assigned on the assault team without his knowledge. As Jack exclaims in shock, another scrawny man tells Jack about the assault team's mission to eliminate Bob Skylum on the moon, and this time, upon recalling the things that happened to his parents back in the incident that Bob Skylum caused, he accepts the mission without a doubt in the world. After getting his approval of the mission, the huge man calls Rhys a major and informs everyone, including Jack, that she will be the leader of the reconnaissance team. With all that said, he ends the meeting and dismisses everyone. On their way back to their quarters, Rhys apologizes to Jack for taking too long to get him released, and blames it on Prosecutor Landry's interference in her investigation. Jack quickly moves past that, and then asks, after telling her how glad he is to see her doing okay, about her parents. Noticing the sad look on her face, he quickly changes the subject and asks her about her new rank as major. Well, Rhys smiles and tells him she was promoted based on the AI, Sapientia's recommendations, and apparently, someone like Inanna, who's also behind them at the time, was also recommended by the AI. Once they get to the end of the corridor, Rhys opens the door in front of them and lets Jack see the other members of his team. When the homesick dude recognizes two of them to be Eric and Jorg, he calls their names and hugs them as tightly as he can, as they all reunite under one mission. Upon realizing how excited they all are, Inanna asks Rhys if she knows how many crimes they've committed, but Rhys just ignores her and keeps looking at the boys. In time, they all get into training, and their handlers have them partake in a computer-simulated battle experience between them and Bob Skylum's forces on the moon. Upon recreating the scene from earlier, before Jack got his genetic screening, it's revealed that the battle is being fought under the moon's gravity, meaning they all need to adapt to fighting at 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. As the simulated battle gets even more intense, more VC3 members get hit by the dangerous laser guns, sustaining more damage. At one point, Jack implements his engrave system, a special program made from solidified digital signals called E2 material that enables the user to endlessly reprogram objects into other materials as long as they're all of the same mass, and creates a plasma handgun, which he shoots at the enemy forces right after explaining that E2 is usually only used during combat or stealth. Unfortunately for him, he's not used to fighting on the moon yet, so he gets hit several times and is eventually sent out of the simulation screaming on top of his lungs. Having realized that he's failed, Jack throws a fit and leaves the simulation room. Moments after doing some athletics exercise, Jorg and Ozma scold Eric and Jack for being twerps and not getting the simulation fighting thingy right on the first try. In their defense, Eric says they still need time, as that stuff is hard enough already. Once they get past that, they all decide to call it a day, but Ozma goes for another run to get his juices pumping. Shortly after he's gone, Jack lies on the grass, closes his eyes, and wakes up minutes later to Zoan standing on top of him and demanding to know all the details about him being behind the orbital shaft collapse. Inanna does her best to get her hacker of a sister off Jack so she can stop harassing, but Zoan's thirst for knowledge turned out to be just too strong. Eventually, another one of their members, a humongous, quiet guy, picks her up like paper and stares deep into her soul. Then, he drops her and lets Inanna explain things to her younger sister. When she hears his information, Zoan shuts the hell up and minds her business. Thereafter, Eric introduces everyone to Jack, Zoan, Inanna's level 4 imprisoned sister, and Dwan, a level 5 death row inmate. Soon after, the team leader, Rhys, shows up to call everyone for a brief meeting. Once everyone's gathered, she reminds them of their mission on the moon, and then informs them that during their 1-year training period, they'll share everything, not just training, but meals, beds, and whatnot to improve their teamwork and coordination. Zoan, upon hearing this, tries to protest her decision, but then Rhys gets pissed and tells everyone that her decision is final. Right after snapping at Zoan, she asks for any objections, but then gets surprised when everyone agrees to her decision. Before the meeting ends though, Jack and the others make sure to butter her up with compliments, and Rhys ends up blushing her heart out. With the plans and stage set, Team VC3 gets right down to training, eating, sleeping, and doing things together for the next year to improve their teamwork. During one of their battle simulations, the team all work hand in hand to not only evade the enemy soldiers, but also counterattack and take them down as well. After training for the day, Jack and Eric get to discuss the reason behind their team setup during their chill time. According to Eric, he feels that Sapientia chose them all to be on the same team, just so they can keep each other in check and don't run away. Right after saying that, he mentions something else about losing everything, but then promises himself and Jack that whatever happens, they still need to protect whatever matters most to them. As Jack repeats the same thing Eric just said, the flashback ends, and we get back to the main story. Back in the present day, a news report reveals that the explosion in the bar the previous night was a result of a suicide bomber, and so far, about 11 civilians were killed, leaving 9 others injured. While Jack stares at the holographic screen in front of him, his memory takes him back to the exact moment he found out Eric Baker, his best buddy in the world, succumbed to the explosion. Seconds later, Zoan shows up and invites Jack to follow them to Eric's funeral, but Jack chooses to just sit there and reflect on life. Satisfied by his response, Zoan and the others head out to a church in the lower-level district of the city to observe Eric's funeral. Before they begin, Rhys thanks the head priest of the church for accommodating them on such short notice, but the priest assures her that it's not a problem. As they discuss, a young man wearing a blindfold returns to the church, and the priest recognizes him instantly. After listening to Rhys's plan, plight, the man with pink hair, whom a bunch of kids call Phil, wishes her well and prepares to leave the church, promising to be back to see the kids. As soon as the father wishes him well, he turns and leaves. At that same moment, Jack's seen with an empty glass in a bar staring at the game he and Eric used to play back when he was alive. Once he gets his drink poured, the poor guy returns to mourning his dead friend, silently wishing there was something he could have done to protect him. As he stares at the screen, he recalls the same memory about them protecting what matters the most, and just keeps quiet to continue mourning Eric. Back at the cemetery, every other VC3 member observes a minute's silence for Eric's passing. With the funeral procession for Eric Baker done, Reese returns to the Earth Ring station for an emergency meeting with her colleagues and superiors. So far, they've discovered that the man with pink hair, identified as Phil, has been seen often with the rebel army's commanders. Also, following the Copernicus battles, they've spotted him visiting the lower-level city, which is suspicious, to say the least. Even though they have no evidence to support this, the team decides to begin an investigation on the guy to figure out his endgame. A few days later, Harry takes Reese and her team members to their latest E2 reinforced stealth spaceship invention, the Stingray. According to the specifics, it's totally undetectable on radar and can maneuver even the rockiest terrain. Not only that, but the E2 material fused into the body of the aircraft allows it to be engraved into any kind of vehicle, as long as the engine and the vehicle's mass also stay the same. Even though the engine can't be engraved, Harry notes that the sound suppression system should be good enough to keep their approach silent to most enemy detection systems, making it suitable for the VC3 assault team's future missions. Having heard all the good things about this shiny new aircraft, Jorg, who's been curious the entire time, asks Harry what they're using the ship for. In response, Reese takes over and informs her team that the Earth's Joint Army plans to engage with Copernicus's rebel army in a full-scale attack. Right after explaining why it's taking them all so long to track Bob Skylum's location, Reese talks about the time Bob had to show his face on the front lines the other day he fought Jack and the others. Ever since then, Reese claims to have new intel on a particular individual who's been suspected of traveling with Bob Skylum a lot. She believes that if they can apprehend this individual, then they can easily determine Bob Skylum's location. So, for now, that's their mission. Aside from that, Reese tells her people that the Joint Army is already mobilizing their troops as they speak, but then again, it might be way harder for them to capture Bob Skylum, judging by how decentralized his organization is, making concealment easier for him. In any case, she tells them that General Pitter is on a warpath, but is still encouraging the two-pronged strategy they're deploying. However, if they fail to capture Bob Skylum on time, then there's no telling how many million souls would be lost to General Pitter's wrath. To prevent such a massive loss of life, Reese urges her team members to stay frosty and wait for HQ to contact them. With all that said, everyone disperses, and Jorg gets to eavesdrop on Inanna and her sister, Zoan, talking about Eric's death. Apparently, Zoan feels he died because of her, but Inanna does her best to help her move past that. Thereafter, the blonde tells Zoan that she can sit this mission out if she doesn't feel up to the task, even playfully threatening to get her back to prison if she tries to defy her orders. By the time Inanna asks Zoan to let her fight with her, Jorg interrupts them to discuss with Zoan, and Inanna gives them their space. Shortly after Inanna's gone, Zoan shares her drink with Georg, and ultimately asks him why he's come to the moon to risk his life for people who don't know him. When Jorg asks for a better explanation, Zoan tells him that she knows he faked his screening results, and that his parents are also safe, so she just can't understand why he would willingly put himself in harm's way, unlike those who have no connection to the real world. Before Jorg gives her his answer, the scene shifts to Harry's in-situ bar and restaurant, where we see Duan eating dinner and Ozma unable to get anything down. Having realized his hesitancy to eat, Duan asks Ozma for his kill count since he came to the moon, and then tells him that they're in war, so he should kill rather than be killed. Hearing this, Ozma muscles up and starts eating. Soon, Inanna joins the guys and gets some dinner from Harry as well. Around this time, Reese finds Jack, her love interest, somewhere dark playing the games he and Eric used to play, and teases him about the irony of the situation. After a light chat about their fallen friend, Reese praises him for finally opening up for the first time after Eric died. Jack tries to shrug it off, but eventually, he opens up and tells Reese that ever since the orbital shaft fell, something changed inside him. Not only that, but now that his best friend's dead, he always gets this feeling that something's about to break. Thankfully though, with Reese by his side, he can feel safer than he normally would. Hearing him say this, Reese gets seriously shy, and Jack quickly kills the moment. In any case, Jack promises Reese that he'll make sure he doesn't lose anybody else, and Reese, touched by his words, gets up, holds his face, and makes a move to kiss him. Sadly, before they get to enjoy the moment, Reese gets a call and returns inside. Moments later, General Pitter mobilizes his battle spaceships from the Earth Ring shaft and sends them toward the moon to begin the campaign. Realizing the big war's about to begin, the VC3 assault team gears up ASAP and pilots the Stingray, their new machine, from the loading dock to join the fleet after getting Harry's blessings. In the meantime, Bob Skylum has one of his commanders, the one they call Doctor, prepare their large prototype for what's to come. Having fused seeds 2 and 3, the Doctor informs Bob that they only need seed 1's input for them to finally finish what they've been building for ages. Hearing this, Bob tells his team to give him a little bit more time, as he's already discovered the identity and location of Seed 1. Before he makes any other statements, they get an alert of the enemy fleet approaching Copernicus City, and after yapping a few jargon, prepare themselves for battle. Upon receiving the order to surrender from the enemy, Robert, aka Bob, leaves the rest in their hands and leaves to find Seed 1. Just then, Harbinger asks him why he's so eager to capture this Seed 1 component by himself, and Bob says that even he doesn't know that yet. In any case, he urges them all not to worry, as the Seed 3, with whom they made a contract, will be joining them soon. With all that said, the criminal team disperses, and they all get down to starting their process. In the next scene, while numerous battleships are seen approaching the Copernicus orbital shaft, civilians hold a protest to send those ships back to where they came from. In the meantime, Reese visits the church where they buried Eric earlier and strides silently through the quiet chapel to pray. Minutes into her arrival, Phil, or the man with pink hair, shows up and asks what she's doing there. Although shocked to see him, Reese keeps her composure as he thanks her for helping evacuate the children before his arrival. Around this time, Zoan notices something messy with Reese's comms and tells Jack and Jorg about it. Hearing this, they try to communicate with Reese, but unfortunately, Reese is hellbent on fighting this in front of her. As she gears up, Phil tells her about the curse on the Moonland, and then talks about her suit and gear like they were abominations to everyone's existence. To see for himself if she's truly a threat to his cause, Phil readies his bionic prosthetic arm for a fight and urges her to fight him. With the stage set, Phil uses the engraving tech in his arm to send a strong signal that messes with all the electronics in the area. Before they know it, attack robots show up on the scene and keep Jorg and Jack busy. Once done, Phil knocks Reese out in one attack, and Jack rushes inside, only to find her unconscious. With the battle between both worlds beginning, Duan and Ozma join Georg to take down the enemy. But unfortunately, some of the robots attack and damage the Stingray, forcing Zoan to touch down. Shortly after making sure Reese is okay, Jack faces Phil, who recognizes him, has Zoan activate zero gravity, and then attacks him with all his might. After failing to land a few shots on Phil, Jack recognizes this guy to fight the same way as Bob Skylum. After a brief pause and discussion, Phil gets serious with Jack and shows him what a real engraving looks like. Having dodged all his attacks, Jack rushes toward Phil and finally gets his glasses off. At that moment, the duo lock eyes and stop fighting when they recognize each other from the past. Right after a brief but awkward silence, Phil flexes his prosthetic arm at Jack and expresses how happy he is to finally be reunited with Jack after searching for him for so long. Having recalled the moment Phil cut his right arm in the past, Jack pieces two and two together and soon figures it all out. Phil is not only Bob Skylum, but is also the mastermind behind the Moonrise terrorist group all along. For a moment, he struggles to understand how that's possible, but then, as soon as Phil causes a reaction on his right hand and morphs his form to resemble that of Bob Skylum's, Jack is convinced that he's right. A few meters away, outside the church, Duan, Ozma, and Jorg all work together to fight and take down as many attack robots as they can while they can. While they're at it, Inanna asks Zoan, who's busy checking out the Stingray's engine status, if things are alright now. Upon confirming that they are, Zoan happily uses the engraving technology on their spaceship to change the vehicle's form into something much smaller and better. Around that time, Jorg and the others got backed up into a corner. As they stand their ground against the bots, Jorg calls Jack and Reese, hoping to get confirmation that they're okay. Having realized that the jamming signal's down, Jorg figures the explanation for Jack's radio silence must be that he's in trouble. With this in mind, he rushes into the church after asking Ozma to cover his ass. Still inside the church, Jack is seen trying to wrap his head around what he just discovered as he asks several questions at once. With so many things to talk about, Phil bends and politely offers that Jack follow him. Sadly, before that happens, Jorg gets inside the church and gets Phil away from Jack. Then, he rushes over to Jack, who's still confused, and, upon confirming Reese's location and health, urges Jack to get his head back in the game so he can grab Reese, and they can all get the hell out of the church before the robots overwhelm them. Around this time, Phil steps out of the hole he was pushed into and faces Jorg. Unable to let Jack escape his grasp this time around, Phil angrily comes at Jorg, who's more than ready to face him, and unleashes his full power. Although it's risky to face Phil alone, Jorg stands his ground and tells Phil to get Reese out of the church and into safety in time. Soon after, Phil, upon dodging Jorg's bullets, grabs him by the face and throws him out of the church. Then he faces Jack and, with a smile on his face, urges him to abandon his companions and follow him as they're meant to be together. With Jack seriously contemplating his life now, Ozma jumps in through the church's roof and fights Phil hand to hand. At this point, Phil loses throws Ozma out of the way, just like he did Jorg. Unfortunately for him, Duan, who's right behind Ozma, shoots him with a laser blast, which ends up knocking him out for a few seconds. With Phil unconscious, the VC3 team gathers inside the church, including Jorg, and, right after Jack apologizes and thanks them for helping him out, they walk out of the church to figure out an escape route. When they get outside, however, they see a seriously angry Phil approaching them with his robot army, warning Jack to never again let Sapientia, the AI, control them ever again. Irritated by Phil's bashful words about the AI system, Jack and his men charge at Phil and his robot army for the attack, and Phil, who's also ready for battle, instructs his Seed 3 robot army never to let Jack and his buddies escape. With the stage set, the battle between the VC3 and the attack bots begins. Over the next few scenes, Jack and his buddies take down as many robots as they can to clear a good enough escape route for them. When they eventually realize that the bots are just too many, Jorg calls the cavalry, Zoan, and almost immediately, the crazy hacker drives a huge truck into the robot army and only stops when she gets closer to her people so they can get in before it's too late. Once they're all safely in the truck, truck, she speeds off toward the exit, and, after almost hitting Phil, finally manages to escape with all of them onto the highway. Despite all that, the robots still keep attacking them, and everyone does their best to keep them at bay. Just then, with no apparent reason at all, the robots drop dead, leaving Jorg, Jack, Duan, and Ozma shocked. In any case, Inanna soon shows up in the engraved Stingray vehicle and gives her sister the signal. Upon receiving the signal, Zoan and the boys jump down from the truck and eventually land on the engraved train beneath it. After making a successful landing, they all pass through the tunnels to freedom and leave the truck and robots to crash into another wall. When Phil spots the explosion in the distance, he realizes he's failed to capture Jack again, so he phones it in and gets on with doing other things. In the meantime, the war between Earthlings and the Seed 3 bots begins, and with Bob Skylam's bots on the losing side, Sylphie, the wild lady, advises him to return so they can figure out their next move. Thereafter, another member asks Bob about his little expedition, and Bob tells him that he finally found Seed 1. Hearing this brings hope to his subordinates, as they all realize that the time they've been waiting for is finally coming. With this, Bob, aka Phil, hangs up the phone and walks away as he promises himself to save Jack from Sapientia. Later that night, the Stingray train travels in silence, and Reese wakes up to find her team members depressed and out of touch. As for Jack, he just sits outside on the back balcony of the train, trying to figure out what the hell happened to the Phil, who used to be so kind and gentle. In time, Reese joins him on the balcony, and Jack finds the resolve to take care of things if he discovers that Phil is Bob Skylam. Elsewhere, Bob and the other higher-ups in his organization discuss the possibilities of the 3 seed entities being the key to world peace or chaos. As soon as their meeting's over, we get to see the exact first scene in this series play out again, meaning we are now out of flashbacks, and are back at the beginning, with the VC3 members inside the Stingray train, Jack humming a nice tune, everyone sleeping, Zoan doing her thing with the computers, and Duan asking him about the song, to which Jack answers that it's a song he always played pretty often back when he was a boy. Very soon after, Skylam's robots attack their train, and the VC3 team members all spring into action to defend their ride. Jack quickly gets himself on top of the train and shoots down as many attack bots as he can with his engraved weapon, saving their arses for only a short while. Eventually, the bots overwhelm the train and cause it to derail at a nearby moon junkyard. About a week later, a random girl strolling through the junkyard spots the VC3 members near their train as they try to report back to HQ. Sadly, the signal's too low for them to send a report, and Zoan suggests they all move eastward towards a vantage point to get a better signal. Before they get to do that, though, Duan tells them they might be there for a reason, and very soon after, the girl from earlier calls to them from her hiding spot. Elsewhere, Phil's seen humming the same tune he used to listen to with his buddy Jack when they were younger. When his trusty companion, Whiz B, shows up, he thanks the little bot for helping them subdue the Joint Army's forces, and tells it that he knows that the AI is using Jack as bait to lure him in. Despite knowing all this, however, Phil remains steadfast in his mission to save his friend from Sapientia. Moments later, the VC3 team members give the random girl from earlier some of their food supplies, and the girl, ecstatic by the thought of not starving to death, thanks them for the help and tells Reese, who asks what she's doing there, that she's looking for someone and has been searching through big wrecks like that one for a long time now. Somewhere along the way, though, the girl says she somehow lost her food supply, but then thanks them yet again for the help they rendered to her. Just then, Jack looks at the wreck in front of him and instantly recognizes it from somewhere. Without saying a word, he walks towards the structure, forcing Reese and the girl to follow him, and only stops when he gets to the cafeteria he used to play at in the facility back when he was younger. To confirm his suspicions, he walks a bit further through the forbidden door, ignoring Reese and the girl, till he finally gets to the room where he lost his right arm to the crazy and real Bob Skylam. Eventually, he gets to a certain lab tank where he used to be kept and cleans off the label on the tank to reveal the name written there, Jacob Jefferson Skylam, a name which the frisky random girl knows to belong to the 50-year-old king of the moon. Having realized that this is probably where he was born, Jack remains quiet and continues staring at the pod. Just then, Reese receives a call from Zoan urging her to get back on board so they can fight the bots approaching, and Reese instantly springs to action as she urges Jack and the girl, Mary, to follow her back outside and fight the bots. As they get outside the room, Jack gets super pissed upon seeing the bots one more time and lunges at them with murderous intent. A few minutes later, an explosion occurs outside the wrecked spacecraft, and soon, Jack, Reese, and Mary all fall to their deaths. During their descent, Jack secures Mary, and by coordinating the fall with Reese, lands all 3 of them on the engraved Stingray vehicle. As soon as the vehicle takes off, the remaining robots follow it, but eventually, the VC3 strike team manages to escape their grasp. A few thousand meters away, at the Joint Army Goddard base, a supply vehicle carrying escorts from Earth arrives on the base to deliver some beautiful women to the soldiers on the base to enjoy themselves. Once the vehicle stops, one of the women inside the vehicle, who happens to be Windy Sylph, one of Bob's commanders, stays behind and waits for the other escorts to be taken by the other soldiers. As soon as they're all gone, she secretly alights the vehicle, stares at the entire base, insults the joke of a frontline base, and waits for her delivery to arrive. Once the delivery arrives, she makes a few calls to alert the others that she's at the designated point. Thereafter, she happily places her right hand on the floor and tries to steal some experimental creatures hidden beneath the base. Unfortunately for her, she runs into a problem somewhere along the line and causes an explosion that destroys the place. Meanwhile, the VC3 assault team is seen traveling further away from the wrecked site with their new passenger, Mary, when she suddenly flares up and asks them to explain what the hell just happened. After a brief moment of confusion and staring at one another, Jorg lies, telling her that they're a civilian research team sent from Earth by the M Atlas Corp and that they encountered those monsters during their investigation of the place, hoping with every fiber in his being that she will buy the lie. Upon hearing a few more inputs from the others, Mary finally chooses to believe the bullshit story they're telling her, seeing as they saved her life. To thank them for helping her out, she takes off her mask, introduces herself, and promises to take them to the nearest town so they can chill out and have fun. About an hour later, Mary finds herself standing outside the train while the others chill inside. Soon, Zoan tells her sister to go talk to the lady who calls herself Mary, as she suspects that she might be a spy from the enemy. Although Zoan may be right, Ozma and Jorg all agree to give the girl a chance, as she might just be a normal, random person. In time, Rhys, the team leader, decides to observe and chill with the girl for now. Once they get past that discussion, Duan asks Rhys to tell everyone where they stand with all that's happened. Rhys gets right to it and names all their failures so far, which is a setback, when put politely. In any case, Inanna tells them they're approaching a mining town in the southern part of the Sea of Tranquility, according to Mary, so they should buckle up and get ready. In the meantime, Jack thinks about everything that's happened up until that point. The pod with his name on it, Phil's involvement in the tragedies that befell him while posing as Bob, and then wonders why he would even do such a thing. As he gets deep in his soliloquy, Rhys calls him back to reality so he can listen to Inanna's review on what they know about Bob Skylum. Upon doing the needful, Rhys advises they report to HQ and await their decision, simply because they lack enough data to make decisions independently. Around that time, Mary and Ozma get to see the mining town on the horizon, and Jack, ever so ready to chill out, promises to see his buddy, Phil, again. Soon, they arrive at the southern mining town, Hypatia, and blend in immediately with the other citizens by wearing mufti. When they get into the market, Jack sneaks behind his colleagues and gets into the market to get some expensive lunar eggs. After buying them, he shows them to Mary, who scolds him for sneaking behind his team's backs to buy something that expensive. In his defense, Jack says he's never tried them before, so the price doesn't matter. Thereafter, he thanks her again for helping them navigate the complicated layout of the town, and Mary, after accepting his gratitude, decides to stick around for a while since she's not in a hurry. Just then, the duo hear a mob rioting at a popular town structure nearby and talking shit about Sapientia and the Obst forces, who they believe to be receiving money and weapons from the joint army. As the whole crowd starts chanting Bob Skylum's name, Jack looks around the place and finds a little girl staring innocently at the people in the mob. With the tension getting higher, a drone arrives on the scene, jams the communication signal in the area, and paves the way for Obst's forces, who arrive after to do their thing. As soon as the Obst forces arrive, they open fire on everyone in the mob, including children, and Inanna and Jorg try to get Jack not to intervene since they're undercover. Before Jack leaves, however, he sees the tyranny of the Obst forces as they obliterate everyone, causing a riot and acting like nothing happened. With the threats neutralized, the captain of the attack team spots the little girl Jack saw earlier carrying a jerry can filled with some liquid and approaches her, ignoring his subordinates' warnings about the girl being a suicide bomber. When he finally gets to her, he offers her a chocolate bar just in case she's hungry, but the girl slaps his hand away and runs as quickly as possible into an alleyway. Realizing she might be with the rebels, the captain's guards follow the girl into the alleyway to capture her, but soon get lost and leave when they don't find her. As it turns out, Jack, who was hiding in the alleyway, grabbed the girl into their hideout and only released her once he was sure the soldiers were long gone. Shortly after releasing her, he tries to check on her arm wound, but soon discovers that she had a prosthetic arm, just like Bob Skylum's, which she loved so much. Eventually, he smiles at her and asks if she has a home, making Mary smile at his kind-hearted gesture. When they get back to the Stingray, Rhys updates HQ on their status and talks to Zoan, who's busy trying to analyze the data she's got on the Hypatia town's database, but couldn't get anywhere because of a piece of information she was missing. Having realized this, Rhys authorizes her to run another scan on the town, and Zoan does the needful. Around this time, a weird creature locked in a pod deep in an underground structure suddenly breaks out of its constraints and walks its way to freedom. In the meantime, Mary asks Jack, as they walk the little girl to her home, if he's good with ditching his buddies just to keep the girl safe. After assuring her that it's all okay, Mary asks Jack if he has a family, and after Jack tells her he's been looking for him for a whole year now, he urges her not to feel so sorry for him at all. Although a little irritated by his answer, Mary ignores him to look at the little girl, who has just stopped in front of a massive hole in the ground. Very soon, they pass through that hole and get to one of the poorest meeting places of the Undercity, where Jack finds lots of weirdos in the dull atmosphere. As he mutters something about flowers, the little girl asks him what a flower is, and Jack, puzzled, tells her a flower is a flower. Soon after, the girl runs to the kitchen, and one of the guys there shows up to recognize and thank the guy who brought their little girl, Rin, home, right after giving them weird looks. With all three people on their seats, Rin soon returns with 2 glasses of water to serve her 2 new friends. Having realized her name to be Rin, Jack gives her all the expensive lunar eggs he bought from the market earlier and urges her to go make an omelet, even though she's not tried them before. Hearing this, Rin promises to try her best and then zooms off into the kitchen to prepare the omelets. While she's gone, Jack asks the man if he's her father, and the man tells him that everyone in the building has lost their families. Thereafter, he asks Jack if he's from Earth, and Jack, puzzled, asks him how he got to know that. In response, the man tells Jack that there aren't so many many people on the moon who can afford to buy eggs at all. So, while the Sapientia puppets on Earth claim to have equality amongst humans, the man lets Jack know that all they know on the moon is decay and poverty. Even currently, the man says there are two factions of people on the moon, those who support Earth and those who oppose it, and both parties are in a fierce conflict that often leads to death and civil wars. Rin's arm is one of the casualties of the insane fighting that's been ravaging their streets so far. Around this time, Rin, who just finished making the omelet, comes out of the kitchen with a plate and tells the man that she sees the prosthetic arm as a blessing from Bob Skylum, not a curse. Seeing this, Jack smiles, invites Rin to sit with them, and then creates a fork from the engraving tech equipped, before offering it to her to eat with them. In the meantime, Zoan aggressively sifts through the data she collected after the scan on the area, till she finally hits the jackpot. Inside a particular file floating on her screen, she finds something about L-Zone, Abaddon, and even the Seed projects. Seconds later, she finds something moving at high speeds toward Jack and figures out, together with Reese, that Jack's not even around them. At that same moment, a bunch of OB soldiers infiltrate the meeting place and arrest Rin and everyone they find there, including Jack and Mary. As they walk the prisoners out to their vans, Inanna, Georg, and Duan are seen nearby watching the stupid soldiers do their thing. It doesn't take long for them to identify these independent forces to be from the Obst group, who claim not to have mercy on rebels, and apparently, children. At this point, they spot Jack and Mary, and then realize just how bad things are. To help them out, the trio quickly rushes to report the situation to the joint army around town. After gathering all the prisoners outside, the captain of the Obst group calls out Rin and tries to get her to tell him the name of the person who helped her escape back in the alleyway. Realizing she's keeping her mouth shut, the captain asks around for the person who helped her. Tired of waiting aimlessly for a response, the heartless kicks the girl and, while pointing his pistol at her head, asks her once again to reveal the person who helped her out. By this time, Jack makes a move to reveal himself to the but just as he's about to get there, the creature that escaped from the underground pod earlier attacks a few of the Obst men and sucks their life force dry, killing them instantly. After seeing what the beast could do, the captain leaves Rin and runs away. Just as the beast approaches Rin, Jack gets in the way and lets the jellyfish-like creature attach itself to his hand. The minute it makes contact, Jack sees a few visions, which he finds strange, and soon shakes off the jellyfish creature, watching it run away. Soon after, the captain, unable to let them all go, throws a grenade in their direction. While Jack moves to protect Mary, he spots Rin and Unk dangerously close to the grenade. Sadly, before he can save them, the grenade explodes and kills them instantly. At this point, Reese, who heard the explosion, sticks her head out of the stingray and wonders what just happened. Elsewhere, Phil's seen recalling what happened to him that day in the facility, right after giving Jack his right arm and sending him to Earth. Apparently, little Phil returned to the forbidden room and found the real Bob Skylum raving mad. When the real Bob sees him, he asks about Jack, but then little Phil ignores his question and asks him if he's truly human. In response, Bob calls him Seed 2, an artificial species of sapiens created on the ship, and breaks the bad news to him that he's not human. Right after saying that, the real Bob stabs his chest with his hand and rips out his mechanical heart, claiming that he won't allow Sapientia to overtake his body. Thereafter, he tells the very confused little Phil that it appears he's not human as well. As it turns out, the Earth administrators feared that the increasing number of AIs exceeding human intelligence was getting out of hand, so they sabotaged and destroyed that facility to kill off all AI beings living there. As Bob's about to say one more thing, he starts losing his mind, and by then Whiz-Bee, Phil's pet robot, swoops in and finishes him off in a very bright light. Around this time, Phil snaps back to reality, but then the next minute, the doctor rushes to inform them that their operative at the Goddard base, Windy, as well as the L-Zone, has been sabotaged. With no time to lose, Phil and his team get in the air to get to the base and save Windy. While mid-air, Doctor suits up and urges Phil to provide her a map to Hypatia so she can check out the disturbance there. While Phil's at it, she asks if he's had fun in a while, and when he says no, she urges him to take Windy out on a date when she gets back so he doesn't continue having nightmares. Hearing this, Phil thinks about going on a date with the rude Windy and quickly decides against it. Upon joking around a little bit more, the doctor gets into the vehicle and jumps off the plane. In the meantime, Mary's seen back on the Western Delambre base in the Sea of Tranquility, checking herself out in the mirror and worried about how she looks. When she eventually gets in the shower, she takes her time to recall Jack's valiance, as well as the horrible things she's said to him before. Realizing her mistake, Mary decides to pay Jack a visit in his room and apologize. Moments later, Jack's seen in his kitchen cooking up some nasi goreng, when suddenly, Mary knocks on his door. Upon opening up, the wild girl sees herself in his room and talks about the aroma of the food he's cooking up. Jack eventually eases up and asks her to wait for him to add some rice to the sauce so the food can be ready in no time. With this, he gets back to cooking and then asks Mary about her family. As Mary's about to give him some details about her two older brothers, Reese rings the doorbell, and Jack, shocked to see her, opens the door for her. As he's about to tell her Mary's in the room with him, Reese goes on a rant to say everything Mary's not supposed to hear, like how she thinks she might be a spy and whatnot. Eventually, she pipes down when she smells the aroma of the nasi goreng and rushes toward his kitchen to check it out. When she finally finds Mary in the room, Reese notices the skimpy clothes she's wearing and freaks the hell out. A few minutes later, the food's ready and served, but the girls aren't eating, and this stresses Jack out. After After a deafening silence, Rhys accuses Mary of invading Jack's room upon learning that he's an officer, and Mary, in her defense, tells her one more time that she's no spy. Soon after, she reminds Rhys of all the things she's helped them with, like navigating them through the confusing moon world and whatnot. At this point, Rhys has nothing else to say, so she silently asks Jack why he didn't tell her earlier that Mary was in the room when she was talking about their mission earlier. Just as Jack's about to respond, his doorbell rings, and he opens it to see a depressed Jorg complaining alongside Duan and Ozma over Mary leaving them for another spaceship. Apparently, Jorg has a crush on her and wants to travel with her again, but doesn't know what to do. As the misguided fool hugs Jack, Duan points to Mary, who's heard everything he just said, and the boys instantly turn their backs on Jack. In all the hubbub, Mary asks Rhys if she's dating Jack, and Rhys, embarrassed, says they're just friends. Having answered her question, Rhys turns to Mary and asks her if she's interested in Jack, and to her surprise, Mary says yes, as Jack reminds her of someone she used to know. Rhys then asks a few more questions to try to figure out her endgame, but soon after Mary remains silent, she leaves and dismisses everyone. In the next scene, Rhys and the rest of the VC3 members attend a virtual meeting with the general and the other members of the military. Upon providing them a full report on their activities, Rhys apologetically tells her superiors about the failures they've encountered so far on their mission, and thankfully, the superiors understand her point, but soon conclude that they must have a mole amongst them who's leaking their information to the enemy. Amidst all that, the general calls for Jack, and then asks him if he exchanged words with the contact, aka Phil, during his encounter. When Jack says no, the general asks if there was anything he noticed, and again, Jack says no. However, he does tell them that something doesn't add up, as he needs to understand why Bob Skylum destroyed the orbital shaft in the beginning. After turning a few heads, the lanky middle-aged man sitting near the general deems it unnecessary to think about a terrorist's mindset. So, in light of the recent update, he does advise that the VC3 unit be incorporated into their eastern forces. To prove his claim, he pulls up a picture of Windy Sylph, a rebel army commander, and explains what happened to the Goddard Eastern base right after her arrival. In any case, since there have been multiple rebel army commanders spotted there, he believes they should join whatever forces they have left and mobilize to check the issue out in the east. Having realized that his staff advisor, aka the lanky old man, is correct, General Pitter authorizes the VC3 to move to the Agram base in the east and then ends the meeting right after telling Jacob Shadow that he's taken note of his assessment on the Bob Skylum matter. As soon as the meeting's over, everyone heaves a sigh of relief and gets back to doing their normal thing. But then General Pitter gets a visit from a very unexpected person, one of the rebel army commanders. About an hour later, Jorg calls Rhys somewhere private so they can talk about Jack, and not Mary. Once he's gotten her full attention, he asks if she's noticed him acting a bit weird lately, and Rhys, confused, asks what he means by weird. Well, Jorg reminds her of the incident the previous day, but then Rhys assures him yet again that he's probably just stressed, seeing as they've been through a lot on the moon. Around this time, Jorg reminds her about their fight in the church with Phil, and then asks Rhys if she knows who Phil is. Although she knows Phil is strange, Rhys reassures Georg yet again that Jack is alright and leaves. To explain what happened right after the OBS captain's explosion, a flashback is shown to the moments after the explosion happened, when the joint army showed up to take care of the aftermath. At this point, Jack, oblivious to the thing behind him, blames himself for causing Rin and her unc's death. At first, Mary tries to let him know it's not his fault, but when he talks about eliminating Bob Skylum swiftly, she switches up and tells Jack that Skylum is the only hope for them all. By then, Jack asks her how she thinks they can end the war, and Mary, unsure of what to say, tells him the people of Earth started this in the first place, so they shouldn't act like victims. In any case, the wretched state of the moon isn't anything new, as the Earthlings slaughtered them all like they were nothing, claiming to follow Sapientia's orders. If not for Bob Skylum, who rose to fight the Earthlings, then nobody would have hope on the moon. Realizing she might be right, Jack gasps, and Mary apologizes for speaking out of line. In any case, Jack expresses that he didn't know all that initially, but now that he does, he'll figure something out. Just then, the jellyfish creature touches Jack where he sits, and the flashback ends. By midnight, Mary's seen staring out the window of their base when she suddenly hears and recognizes the song Jack's humming from somewhere. Curious, she approaches Jack, who's also staring out into space, and asks him about the song. In the meantime, Inanna and her sister are seen sifting through the intentional disinformation to figure out Phil's location. Around this time, Jack talks to Mary about this being the first meeting with someone who knows the song he's singing. He tells her it's a very old song, but Mary, after telling Jack that her brother is someone who's been missing for 8 good years, promises to find him one day. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Jack cheers her on, and they chit-chat for a few more minutes before Mary gets up to go to bed. Before leaving though, Mary thanks him for real this time for saving her from the bomb blast and walks to her quarters with newfound hope that she will find her brother, Phil, one day, as long as he's on the moon. Meanwhile, Phil, upon approaching the Goddard base, changes his face to match Bob Skylum's and watches from up above as the sea of jellyfish creatures eat up the entire base. As the sea of harmful creatures moves westward, Bob and his commanders make sure to follow and track them to the Sea of Crises. When she finally lands in Hypatia, the doctor's shocked to see that the thing they call the L-Zone has disappeared. Around that time, Mary also announces to the rest of the VC3 that she will now be an official member of their team. Hearing this, Reese refuses to let the twerp join their team, as she states that they, being from the joint army, can't let just any civilian from the moon accompany them any longer. Around this time, Mary attaches herself to Jack to make Reese jealous, and tells her that she only wants to travel with him. By then, Reese loses her shit and chastises Jack for trying to be slick and whatnot. Just then, Zoan and Inanna show up and are updated on the situation at hand. Having heard Mary's plea, Jack urges Reese to just let Mary tag along with them. So at this point, Reese's hands are tied. A few hours later, while the VC3 members hit the road to their next location, Mary, who's sitting outside the vehicle as usual, drifts off into a memory in her past, where she's seen floating inside some liquid with various weird tentacles surrounding and trying to touch her. Upon reaching a point in the memory, Mary jerks back awake and continues staring at the sea of moon sand in front of her. In the meantime, the other VC3 members continue analyzing the influx of information they've been getting so far. Although many of them are just disinformation and false flags, there's one image that still doesn't make sense to them, and that is an image of Phil in Agarum, which is 100% real. Upon confirming the location of his hideout, Jack frowns at his longtime buddy, and after wondering what the hell happened to Phil, decides that he's going to make Phil tell him everything that happened this time. Soon after, Inanna tells them that they need to report this to the joint army stationed on the moon, as the general and the special unit stationed at Agarum are planning some secret operation on the moon's people. When Jorg talks about them moving alone, Reese says that the vice commander Clemenza is in Agarum, aka the lanky middle-aged man from earlier, and since he's the head of the operation, they must hurry and get to him before he unleashes hell on Copernicus. Just when they're done talking, Inanna gets sick and collapses from some sort of moon illness. Moments later, Reese mans the comms center on the ship and tries desperately to contact their main base, while the others check up on Inanna to provide first aid. Sadly, they quickly realize that they have neither the drugs nor the expertise to treat such an illness, even if they get to the joint army base on time. Their only hope at this point is to find a local specialist or doctor who's spent a long time on the moon. Knowing fully well that it'll take longer to get to Agarum and that Inanna might not make it, Mary suggests they take Inanna to the one person she knows who can treat the illness. But before everyone gets their hopes up, she tells them that they'll have to get to Posidonius first, which is in the opposite direction from Agarum. Around this time, the team is at an impasse, as Inanna even advises them to continue going toward Agarum so she doesn't stop them, as the east is the only area they still hold, and, as soldiers, they mustn't let their emotions control them. Right after she collapses again, everyone turns to Reese, the team leader, to hear her decision. After a brief silence, Jack finally responds, telling everyone that they should always value a comrade's life over the mission, and suggesting they turn around and get to Posidonius. Satisfied by his response, the entire team, including Reese, remains hopeful and turns the vehicle around to get to Posidonius. As the VC-3's Stingray travels to its new destination, Reese talks to Georg about how terrible she feels as a person, stating that if Jack hadn't intervened moments earlier, she might have chosen the mission over Inanna. Having heard her, Jorg tells her it's fine, as she acted like a soldier. Now that he's finally seen the change in Jack's mentality, Jorg admits that he was worried for nothing, as Jack hasn't changed one bit. After 2 more days of traveling, the VC-3 team finally arrived at Posidonius to meet the doctors. As they're about to embark on the journey to get to the very remote hideout of the doctors, Mary picks Jack, Duan, and Zoan to be on her team, and Reese, though pissed at her choice, has no choice but to let her go with them. On their way there, Mary, who let Jack lift all the heavy load, urges him to walk quickly, or he'll get left behind, and a very pissed Jack reminds her about their time at the subway market 2 hours ago. Apparently, Mary had the VC-3 team buy lots of supplies and stuff she knew the doctors might need in their settlement, and made poor Jack haul everything through the mountains to the hideout. Back in the Stingray, Reese listens in on Jorg and Ozma talking about how hot Mary is, with Jorg even scolding Jack for not falling for Mary yet. While Ozma remains confused, Jorg, knowing Reese is eavesdropping, tells Ozma that Mary is interested in Jack, although for now, they don't really know the kind of feelings she seems to have for him. Unable to take the uncertainty anymore, Reese gets up angry, and under the pretense of being worried for Inanna, leaves the Stingray running to accompany Mary and the others to the doctor's hideout. When she finally catches up to them all, Mary frowns and asks her if she still finds it hard to trust her. When Reese tells her no, citing that she's just following the rules and accompanying the other 3, Mary rushes behind them and teases Jack, who's still sore from doing all that heavy lifting. Upon seeing how free and assertive she is with her feelings for Jack, Reese gets jealous and recalls a memory she's never forgotten from 11 years ago. On that day, young Reese, also the mayor's daughter at the time, and young Jack ran into 3 thugs who hate and threaten everybody, even kids, for following Sapientia. To protect his buddy, Jack risks his life getting beaten just to buy the pretty Reese enough time for her to escape. After hitting and subduing Jack, the 3 move toward Reese and threaten to off young Eric, who's already knocked out, if she doesn't surrender to them. Just when she's about to surrender, Jack gets up again and, this time, attacks the trio with a bottle. Unfortunately for him, they dodge and beat him up yet again, but despite all that, Jack still manages to get hold of one of them and bite him in the nuts. Upon surviving the nut bite, the trio get pissed at Jack and point all their guns at them. Before they can pull the trigger, however, Harry, Jack's butler, shows up and beats the living shit out of the guys, saving the kids. Later that evening, Reese scolds Jack for risking his life for her sake, and young Jack, wondering why she's angry, asks her to tell him what's more important than a friend's life. Around this time, the flashback ends, and Reese smiles happily as she realizes that her love interest still hasn't changed after all. After traveling a few more meters, Zoan spots movement, and soon enough, they all get to meet a bunch of people. Mary quickly takes over, and after calling one of them Kevin, eases the tension and chats lightly with them. In time, the entire group of doctors welcomes them all to their base, and while some of them share their gifts, the real doctors take care of Inanna. Very soon, Inanna recovers from the illness, and Reese checks up on her, thanking her stars that Inanna's finally back to normal. Soon after, Mary checks up on Kevin during his smoke break and stops for a chit-chat. After letting her know that he knows those people are from Earth, Kevin accepts their visit, since it turns out they brought some food and supplies for them. Moving past that, Kevin asks Mary if she's still searching for her long-lost brother, and she says yes. Thereafter, he tells Mary that, from his findings, it appears that the infection on Inanna's body didn't happen naturally. Based on what he's found, she was intentionally infected by someone 3 days ago, and since he doesn't know who would do such a thing, he warns Mary to be cautious of her moves with the VC3. Around that time, Zoan, her sister, and the others walk up to them, thank Kevin, who's pretty pissed at Inanna for leaving while she's still recovering, and tells him they have to leave now so they don't run into trouble again. Realizing there's nothing he can do, Kevin wishes them well and urges them never to come back there again. With all that said, the VC3 leaves the remote hideout, never to return, and Kevin wishes Mary well. Elsewhere, at Agaram City, Phil's seen in one of the laboratories freezing every L-zone jellyfish creature pod he can find there, and complaining over Sapientia outsmarting them like that. With the tension in the air growing, the VC3 gets back on track to the city, and Jack apologizes to Reese for doing something that might damage her standing. Reese, after assuring him that she's fine, since it's not the first time, tells him that she's learned that she should be more open with her feelings sooner, so she doesn't miss out on the joys of life. Having heard this, Jack smiles and lets her do her job. By then, Jorg, who stands outside the vehicle, thinks about the time they just bought to counter the mole, and then receives a message from Inanna commending him for a job well done. In response, Jorg asks if she's okay, and Inanna assures him that she's fine, as it's all just part of the mission. As Bob's Skylum army approaches the Sea of Crises, the crazy dude inside laughs over the sea of jellyfish creatures ravaging the moonland. As for Phil, he takes a break inside the laboratory after freezing off the entire L-zone jellyfish creature pod stash. While taking his break, the doctor, who's later identified as Salamandra, storms in and tells Phil that the L-zone jellyfish in Hypatia's underground lab have disappeared. Puzzled, Phil asks for an explanation, and Salamandra tells him that the jellyfish was reprogrammed, just like the others, by the branch embedded into Sapientia. Furthermore, she adds that she noticed traces of the jellyfish creature left in the Hypatia hideout's records, and Phil asks her about the state of the city. After Salamandra assures him that the city's doing fine, Phil gets up to continue gathering information. Before they get to that, a slight tremor occurs, and the duo rush outside the facility, only to find out that an explosion happened somewhere in town just a few minutes ago. Soon, they realize that their eastern party just bombed one of Obst's housing complexes, and Phil urges Salamandra to shut their hideout down and lie low so they won't partake in the chaos. At the time, Phil and Salamandra didn't know that they were being watched by the Joint Army's spies, so they moved freely. Back in the Joint Army base a few miles away, Clemenza reveals to General Pitter in a meeting that they've finally confirmed Bob Skylum's location, and then asks for permission to send his Hound Squad to take Bob down at all costs. Realizing just how wasteful that might be, Pitter suggests they send a smaller squad, aka VC3, there to subdue and bring in Bob Skylum. By this time, Clemenza protests this decision, as he feels the leader of the squad, Reese, is not only incompetent, but is even 36 hours behind their scheduled arrival. Having stated that fact, Clemenza tells Pitter that he can only give Reese a grace of 24 hours to show up and take the job. If she fails to show up with her squad by then he'll send his Hound unit into Agaram City and take down Bob Skylum, even if it means killing a few civilians. With no argument to give, Pitter gives in to Clemenza's demands and ends the meeting. Right after, Pitter gets into another meeting with one of Bob Skylum's commanders. This time, the duo discusses Seed 1 and the possibility of Sapientia being behind its disappearance, with Pitter racking his brains to figure out his next course of action. 24 hours after Pitter's meetings, the VC3 team finally arrives in Agram's vicinity. As they speed through the highway, about to reach their destination, Inanna apologizes again for wasting their time, and then tells the others that she's tried contacting their people in Agaram for some time now, all to no avail. Although the radio silence may be them just being careful, Reese suspects Clemenza might be giving them a hard time since they're late for their arrival. In any case, Mary speaks out of line and asks the team what they all plan to do with their lives once they finally kill the big, bad Bob Skylum. With no response in sight, she realizes she's messed up and quickly apologizes for acting like a jerk. Jack, Jack, on the other hand, ignores her and thinks about his buddy, Phil, one more time. When they finally get to see the beautiful city on the horizon, Jack gets up and continues staring at the city. About an hour later, they get to the entrance gate, but are denied entry into the city by Clemenza's guards, who both claim that the Hounds are on the loose to hunt down Phil and the other rebels. As it turns out, Hound is a hardline anti-terror unit that was formed in the east, and their deployment means that they've been permitted to kill. Understanding the nature of the situation, Reese and the others refrain from causing any more trouble. Some minutes later, Jack, unable to stand any more senseless killings and damages, damns the consequences and readies himself to get past the guards. Right before he leaves, Reese steps in front and urges him to let the Hounds do their job. But Jack, right after telling her that he can't let them kill the contact, seeing as he still needs answers, apologizes, pushes Reese aside, runs, and jumps past the guards, who immediately call for backup. Moments before the chaos ensues, Salamandra is seen in the Agarum hideout discussing with Phil and the other crazy commander about the L-Zone creatures they froze earlier. Now that they have enough time, Phil asks about Seed 1, and after listening to the crazy commander laugh about how his whereabouts are unknown, Salamandra promises to revise the plan. With this, the boys urge her to keep herself safe and end the call. Seconds after the call ends, Salamandra sips her coffee and calls Jack rude for showing up at her place without being invited. Although shocked to see Salamandra in the hideout where Phil's supposed to be, Jack keeps his cool and urges her to surrender peacefully so no townsfolk gets hurt. Hearing this, Salandra appreciates his kindness, but then insists that he let her go. At this point, Jack throws a fit, and Salamandra turns to get a good look at his face. Upon recognizing him to be Felosio's friend Jacob, she switches up and talks about their leader, Phil, for a short while. Upon hearing her talk about Phil just like that, Jack gets a large influx of unwanted memories, as he slowly accepts the fact that Phil is indeed Bob Skylum, the leader of the rebel group. After confirming that Jack didn't report Phil to the joint army, Salamandra wonders what she's to do with him and even gets dangerously close to his engraved gun. By this time, Jack, who knows that the Hound soldiers are surrounding the apartment currently, begs Salamandra to consider surrendering so she can leave the place alive, but right after Salamandra tells him to defeat her first, the soldiers hanging outside the window throw 2 grenades into the apartment, and both of them take care of the grenades to avoid them exploding. Thereafter, the Hounds start bashing the door to gain entry into the apartment. Unable to let them in, Salamander reinforces the steel door and gets on with fighting the Hounds, rappelling down to the apartment. When she gets exposed to a shot one time in the fight, Jack jumps in to knock the soldier out, and then, after watching her kick 2 soldiers, tells her he doesn't want anybody to die. Around this time, Salamandra slams him into the ground and, right after telling him that the war is being fought to end all the killings, expresses how happy she'll be if he follows her to meet Phil. As the duo decides on their next move, another soldier shows up, and Salamandra throws Jack at the guy before breaking down the apartment door with her bare feet and taking down all the soldiers outside. In no time at all, she takes down a few Hounds, gets down the stairs, and makes a run for it. Having recognized her, the Hounds instantly change their target to her and the male soldier protecting her. As the fight thickens, Salamandra kicks down more soldiers to get a clearer escape path. Meanwhile, Mary finds Duan cooking up some soup back at their spot in Agarum City and tries asking him what he's cooking. Without saying a word, Duan gives her a bowl of soup, and Mary falls in love with the food once she tastes it. While the duo sit and eat, Duan tells her to try understanding Reese and the others, citing that most of them don't know how to deal with people on the moon and whatnot. Concurring with his point, Mary asks him why he's there with the lot, and, right after Duan tells her he's usually alone and is not swayed by love or hatred, he gives Mary a creepy smile that keeps her quiet. Soon after finishing the meal, Mary gets up, ready to go after Jack, but this time Zoan shows up and advises against that, as she knows things might get complicated. Although disappointed, Mary picks up some candy and goes on her merry way. Before she gets far, 2 joint army soldiers stop her and politely ask her to go on a date with them. Some seconds later, the captain of the unit shows up, shoos the bozos away, and upon recognizing Mary as a moon civilian, asks for her ID. Before anything happens, Zoan rushes in to inform the army guys that Mary is a guide hired by Major Reese herself. As you'd expect, the army captain is a jack, and so, because he wasn't informed of this, orders his men to detain her. Just then, Duan shows up and gets in their way, but then the captain, unfazed, orders his men to check Duan's ID and detain both him and the woman as well. By this time, things get violent as the men rough-handle Mary till she loses control and lets off an energy blast so severe that it knocks out the captain and his puny men right away. Thankfully, the VC3 members are alright, but many of them don't even know what just happened. In the meantime, Clemenza finds out about Jack's involvement in the Hound's mission and quickly orders his people to inform Jack to leave so he doesn't get hit in the crossfire. While they work on that, another unit informs Clemenza that the unidentified object from Goddard is making its way towards Agarum City, and if care isn't taken, might hit the fan real quickly. Around that time, Jack catches up to Salamandra and stops her with his martial arts. Having recognized his skill, Salamandra challenges him to a fight and does her best to knock Jack out as quickly as possible so she can get away ASAP. To do this, she extends her hand, shaping it into a blade, and uses that hand to block as many shots as she can to save her entire body. Just when she finally has Phil in a submissive position, a joint army drone shows up and shoots at her, splitting them up. Realizing she's about to be caught, Salamandra dodges the drone and continues running for dear life. When Jack comes to, he transforms his gun into into a sniper rifle and shoots down the drone from afar. Then, he continues chasing after Salamandra and only stops when they both notice an explosion in the distance. For the next few seconds, the duo stare at the explosion, but then Salamandra recognizes the location where the explosion happened to be the underground lab where the frozen L-zones are kept, so she makes her way toward the place, and Jack follows her. In the meantime, the horde of L-zone jellyfish monsters continues traveling toward Agaram City at amazing speed, devouring everything in their path. Hovering above the horde is a fleet of rebel ships monitoring the path of the monster. When Phil, aka Bob Skylum, finally returns to the master ship, he gets welcomed and informed about the horde's movement. Currently, the mutant is heading toward Agaram, and Bob tries to figure out what's drawing the monster to Agaram. A few minutes after the explosion, another horde of L-zone monsters seeps out from the underground lab and travels through the city of Agaram to find something. Nearby, Salamandra follows the monster's path to a deserted part in the city, hoping to finally figure out what the crazy monster is after, completely ignoring Jack, who's still chasing after. At one point, the monster changes lanes, and Salamandra, worried that the monster might attack the few people who live in these areas, latches onto a rebar and shoots at the monster when she gets above it, all to no avail. Around this time, Jack catches up to her and spots the monster, which he recognizes from the other time. As he rushes towards Salamandra to join her, the doctor herself faces the monster head-on and gets slammed to the side by the impatient monster. As she struggles to keep up, Jack shows up and throws an incendiary grenade at the monster, only to watch nothing happen to the monster. Unable to figure out a way to bring the monster down, he continues running beside it, hoping that, by some miracle, something happens and stops it. Upon running for a few more meters, the duo stops when they notice a humanoid figure standing in the L-zone monster's path, and Jack soon recognizes the person to be Mary. As he tries getting her out of the way, something very weird happens, and the creature comes to a standstill as soon as it gets in front of Mary. While under some form of hypnosis, Mary touches the creature and creates a huge electrical spark that causes the monster to extend its tentacles and attack Jack and Salamandra. While dodging the attacks, Jack shouts at Mary, urging her to get the hell out of the way, but when she doesn't move an inch, he engraves a grappling hook and uses it to get her out of harm's way. Upon landing, Jack tries to get Mary to snap out of her hypnotic state, but as he touches her cheek, something happens, and he gets into a trance where he finds Mary suspended and trapped inside a transparent energy ball. Without fail, he approaches her, touches the ball, and breaks it, freeing her from the restraints. When she finally snaps out of her jail cell, Mary frowns at poor Jack and slaps the shit out of him, as she thought she was being harassed by the guy. As Salamandra tries to wrap her head around what just happened, the L-zone monster suddenly turns into a huge mass of hardened cyst, and, soon enough, joint army hounds surround them and take them all to custody at the Agaram base. While on their way to the base, Jack thinks about the things he doesn't know yet, and remembers what he saw in his trance earlier, and whatnot. Before he can remember any further, a very pissed Ozma reminds him of his current status. After being suspected of helping a terrorist attack the previous year, Ozma reminds him that right after Sapientia suspended his punishment, he was placed under Reese's care ever since, and will put Reese in trouble with all his brash tantrums. Knowing fully well that Ozma's right, Jack keeps quiet and surrenders to whatever punishment he may incur in the future. In time, they get to the joint base in Aragum, and Reese slaps Jack on the cheek for disobeying her orders. Thereafter, Jack asks after Mary, who is currently sleeping in a room, and then asks if Salamandra is around and okay, to which Reese says she's imprisoned deep underground. Right after saying that, Reese reminds Jack what he said back when he disobeyed her, and then accuses him of acting out of line, all in the name of protecting someone. After all that's happened, Reese, knowing Jack, knows he's hiding something, so she asks him to spit it all out now that they're at it. At this point, Jack recalls his first reunion with the adult Phil, and instead asks to meet with Salamandra one more time so he can talk to her. Hearing this, Reese asks him if he knows his situation, and Jack mutters a few more stupid words that only make her more pissed at him. Upon giving a few more dirty slaps, Reese walks out on the bozo and leaves. Shortly afterward, she joins Clemenza and his minions in the underground lab where Mary is analyzed, where she gets scolded for arriving late, before getting thanked by the lanky man himself for bringing with her something more valuable. Around this time, Jack gets put in the same room with Zoan and Duan, who help treat his wounds from the slap. While they discuss, Zoan tells Jack that he has Reese to thank for his life, because if not for her, then he'd have been deported the minute he disobeyed the orders. As such, Reese must have a lot of power for him to get off the hook so easily. With that said, Zoan manages to hack into Mary's lab room to get a live feed of her being analyzed, which she instantly shows the other two. Back in the lab, the researchers discover a powerful energy surge in Mary's body, matching the same energy they've measured in the L-zone monsters. Although they don't know why that's so, the lead researcher tells Clemenza that the mutant strain of the organism has completely merged with Mary at this point, meaning she must be the core, or better yet, the queen bee of the L-zone hive, and this makes her a very dangerous individual. Having heard this, Jack remembers the incident where Unk and Rin died, and figures that must be when the energy surge entered her. At that moment, Clemenza receives a call about General Pitter making his way toward the Agaram base, and though shocked to hear about his arrival, he still prepares to meet him. As the general makes his way toward the Agaram base, the sea of L-zone monsters keeps moving toward the city at an alarming speed. At one point in its journey, Bob Skylum's fleet drops dozens of bombs on the horde, hoping to take them all out. Sadly, even that isn't enough to stop the monsters, as all they do is split up and continue together as one mass hunk of gooey monster. By this time, Bob Skylum, the rebel leader, later, finally understands why the monster is referred to as a seed, just like them, as they withdraw from the fight to figure out other things. Soon after, Windy and Harbinger arrive at the flying ship via a small aircraft, and after welcoming her aboard, Bob urges her to report on her mission at Goddard. So far, Windy says the base encountered the L-Zone, which vanished from Hypatia, and calls it a new seed encounter. When they talk about a certain person being the core of the L-Zone monster, Bob asks for the identity of the person, and Windy pulls up a photo of Mary, aka the core of the L-Zone monsters. Right after their meeting, Phil gets to a private place on the ship and crashes out, as he'd previously tried to keep poor Mary out of everything initially. Back at the Aragum base, the researchers there get wary of the L-Zone monster approaching the city, as they fear they should be evacuating instead of sitting and waiting for the monster to come at them like sitting ducks. In the meantime, Clemenza, Reese, and some guards stand at the entrance to the base to welcome Pitter to the base on such short notice. Upon checking up on every single one of them, Pitter requests to see the rebel commander they captured before the other HQs do something about it, and Clemenza takes him to the underground prison. Around this time, Ozma does a scan on the area around the base and soon realizes just how close the monsters are to them. While he continues his scan, a random worker in the base finds some weird device on Pitter's ship and asks his colleagues for thoughts on what he should do about it. Reese, on the other hand, is seen walking towards Sapientia AI in a dark room and staring at it. Meanwhile, Inanna tells Jorg that she's worried about Mary and the monster horde approaching them. When she asks him if Sapientia had anticipated this, Jorg says he doesn't know, as it seems that their mission to delay their arrival and uncover the mole in their midst didn't work as well. After muttering a few more things about what's happened, Gerog finds himself questioning Sapientia's intentions, and even gives off a chuckle as he confesses that he never thought he would do something like that on the moon. In any case, he admits to understanding how Eric felt before he died, and Inanna, wary of what he just said, urges him not to think that way. At the same moment Jack finds Reese moving into Mary's room, General Pitter and Clemenza's men make their way towards Slalomandra's cell deep underground. Inside Mary's room, Reese stops and stands in front of the lady, questioning her reality and asking Mary's unconscious body to explain why she feels like a horrible person for doubting and not believing her all along. Jack, who's listening in on her conversation, feels bad for Reese, his long-term buddy. Around that time, General Pitter gets super close to Salamandra's cell and notions to her to come toward him. When she finally heeds his call, Pitter recognizes her as the famous rebel army commander Amir L. Salamandra and compliments her beauty, which makes Salamandra question if he truly thinks that. With no response given, General Pitter silently reveals himself to be the mole, as he silently hacks into the electricity distribution system around the base and causes a blackout all over the entire base, using the EMP device that the random worker overlooked earlier. Suddenly, Zoan gets disconnected from the system, and the entire army base is thrown into pandemonium. With gravity control down, Jorg and Inanna split up to check on the others, including Mary and Reese. Right after causing the blackout, Pitter tells Salamandra to abandon their search for Seed 1, as they urgently need to capture the girl, Mary, first. Hearing this, Salamandra activates her super strength, uses it to break out of prison, right in front of Clemenza and his men, and takes down all the soldiers shooting at her, including the lanky old man. By then, Ozma, who's returning to the base, notices the blackout and radio silence and wonders what could have happened. Soon after, he spots a huge battleship with cloaking technology activated in the sky approaching the base, and gets himself ready for battle. However, when the ship passes over him, Ozma jumps as high as he can and throws a grenade at the hull of the ship, damaging the engine and causing the ship to crash. Very soon after the ship's crash, Ozma turns back to find several more battleships approaching the base for an invasion. With no time to waste, the ships soon start firing thousands of rounds at the base, destroying everything in sight, and the whole base is alerted to be ready for a big fight. To prepare herself for the situation at hand, Reese orders the guards in Mary's room to go fight outside and leave Mary in her care. Shortly after they're gone, Mary activates her engraving and creates a gun which she points at Reese's head. Around this time, Inanna shows up with Jack's gear and gives it to him. As soon as he puts them all on, Zoan gets to recover footage from Mary's, but then finds Reese standing dangerously close to her with a gun in her hand. As for Jorg, he walks toward the prison cell and finds Clemenza half dead. When he asks the man to give him an update, Clemenza tells him that the rebels are after Mary. By then, the battle outside becomes more intense, as both sides clash bullets and leave no one alive in their wake. In time, one of the battleships crashes into the Agarum control centers, and Phil, who had survived the fall, rushes further into the facility to save his sister. Meanwhile, Mary finds herself in a trance, walking in a certain direction, when suddenly, an L-Zone monster shows up, calls her name, and tries to shroud her in a cloud of darkness. Having a strong will, Mary snaps herself out of the dream she was having, and finds Reese's gun to her face. With no time to lose, Reese apologizes for what she's about to do and pulls the trigger. Thankfully, as she pulls the trigger, Jack, who arrived in the nick of time, shoots her hand and causes her to misfire. Upon realizing what just happened, Mary gets up and peeks around to see Jack holding his gun and pointing it at Reese. With the chaos and pandemonium increasing outside, Jack urges Mary, who's still confused over whatever the hell's happening, to come to his side first. While she's at it, Reese speaks up for the first time since she misfired and tells Mary to get away from Jack. After telling and getting Mary behind his back, Jack stares at Reese with a nervous look and recalls the moments when he heard the researchers talk about Mary's source of power. So, right after telling them all about Mary's power source, the lead researcher shows them a few images of the crystallized L-Zone monster and explains that Jack's presence seems to have somehow affected the energy that fused with Mary, which in turn caused the bleaching or crystallization of the organism. In light of all that's happened, the researcher concludes that Jack, Mary, and the L-Zone creature might have some connection with one another. Having heard this, Duan and Zoan give Jack confused looks as he tries to exonerate himself of any accusations. As for Clemenza, he leaves the lab to welcome the general, right after ordering the researchers to upload all their findings to the AI, Sapientia, and await its decision. Upon recalling the crucial moments that led to where he is now, Jack asks Reese if Sapientia ordered her to kill Mary, and Reese, with tears on her face, asks Jack why he's always the same and never changing. As she pulls up her gun against the duo, Jack apologizes for dragging her into his business, and then tells her that Eric was right all along. If anything, Sapientia intentionally put all of them in the same team so they could all be able to stop each other from moving or running away. Around this time, the tearful Reese orders him to shut the hell up, as the only thing she's ever done in her entire life was following Sapientia's orders like a loyal dog. Understanding her plight, Jack says a few more things about the painful decision she was just about to make, and then adds that maybe, in an alternate dimension, there was a way for Eric not to die. By the time he mentions just his usual catchphrase, "Nothing's more important than a comrade's life," Reese breaks down, and he unapologetically tells her that he's going to help Mary out with or without her help. With Reese now fully crying on the floor, Jack promises to take care of everything and return to everyone a whole man. With that said, he picks Mary up and leaves Reese crying softly on the floor. Meanwhile, Salamandra's seen fighting and questioning every soldier she meets about the whereabouts of the Mary girl. So far, nobody seems to know where she is, so she just kills them and moves on to the next one. Soon enough, numerous soldiers arrive to fight her, but she takes down an awful lot of them till they're no more. Just then, Zoan, who's been hiding behind a corner and spectating the fight all along, throws a grenade near Salamandra. Right after it explodes, she approaches the large woman and shoots her. To her surprise, Salamandra blocks the bullets with just her bare hands and kicks the out of her. Seconds later, Inanna and Duan charge at her to bring her down, but Salamandra very quickly knocks Inanna out like clockwork. As for Duan, the big guy, he stands his ground against the mighty Salamandra and proves to be a tough guy to fight. Sadly, he soon meets defeat when Salamandra axe kicks him and runs away. Shortly after watching her leave, Duan returns to the girls to check up on them, and surprisingly realizes that they're okay. Elsewhere, Jack and Mary finally manage to find an exit out of the base, but before they leave, they stop to observe the battlefield and soon see the sea of L-Zone monsters approaching the Agaram base. With no time to waste, Jack holds Mary's hand and waits for something to happen to the sea of monsters. Sadly, the horde just keeps getting stronger as they approach Mary, climbing over the thick electronic shield that protects the real Agaram city. Realizing that the hand-holding might not work, Mary apologizes and then asks Jack if those things are truly attacking the city just because of her. After indirectly finding out that she's the cause of the monsters attacking, Mary spouts a few more weird talks and then asks Jack to get her out of there. Jack happily agrees to do just that, but as they're about to leave the base, Jorg shows up and stops them from moving any further. By that time, the L-Zone monster finally breaks into the Agaram Joint Army base and devours everything in its path. When Jack tells Jorg about the things that will happen if Mary doesn't get the hell out of the base, Jorg tells him that he's already heard it all from Reese. Moving on, Jorg, right after claiming to understand and know how Jack feels, offers to get Mary out of there in his stead to prevent Jack from running into trouble again with the Joint Army. When Jack refuses to hand Mary over, Jorg talks about Sapientia's guidance, and, at this point, Jack damns the consequences and jumps out of the space with Mary. Unable to let them escape, Jorg follows them both and kicks Jack out of the way, ending his flight. Just as he's about to put his hands on Mary, Jack zooms back to him and fights Jorg, who's much stronger than him. After desperately trying and failing to land a hit on Jorg, Jorg axe kicks the shit out of him and leaves him with a bloody nose. As Jack writhes in pain from the kick, Jorg gets behind him and tries to get him in a submissive position. Thankfully, before Jorg forces Jack to surrender, Phil shows up and stops the bat from wounding Jack. At one point in their fight, he holds Jorg's gun and lets him fire all the bullets he can into his hand. Then, when Jorg eventually drops the gun, Phil breaks it and asks Mary if she trusts the man escorting her. When Mary assures him that she trusts Jack with all her heart, Phil smiles, points his right arm at Jorg, and then releases Whiz B from his right arm, shocking both Jorg and Jack at the absurdity of the whole situation. Eventually, Mary recognizes the bot to be Whiz B and plays around with it, while the other boys just stare at it. Upon having a few more chats with his sister, Mary, Phil orders Whiz B to escort her and Jack out of the facility, and Whiz B, obeying his master's orders, figures out where the Stingray is. As Jack and Mary leave for the garage, Jorg tries to stop them one more time. Only this time, Phil blocks him off. At this point, he asks Phil a few questions about his identity, but as Phil says nothing, he continues fighting him. Just then, the L-Zone monsters cause an explosion on the window pane of the room, and Phil readies himself to leave the base. When they finally get to the garage, Mary ignores the Stingray, and instead, hops on a bike with Jack, before riding it out to freedom. Shortly after they leave, Phil endures a serious beating from Jorg, but soon enough, Salamandra informs him that it's now time to leave, and Phil, upon getting up, faces the broken window pane and jumps off the ledge. When Jorg gets to the ledge, however, he's disappointed to find Phil on his battleship, leaving the base. As Jack leaves the Agaram base with Mary, he stares back at the city and apologizes to everyone for leaving so abruptly. Around this time, the other VC3 members find Jorg standing atop the balcony and quickly rush to retrieve him before the monster gets to him. With all that's happened, however, Reese becomes a new person as she accepts the fact that Jack is and always will be the same person. About a year after the Agaram attack, a cloaked person, identified as Reese, visits what seems to be an abandoned facility and finally stops when she gets to the thing she calls her mother. A few days after Reese's visit to the abandoned facility, General Pitter and Salamandra are seen at the Moon Chain's chemical plant site up north, near the Plato crater, doing a standard checkup on the growth and health of the L-Zone monster stored there. When Pitter asks Salamandra about them, she assures him that everything's okay, as, over the past year, Wisby's data processing ability as Seed 4 made it possible to control Mary, meaning they had no choice but to rely on her. Having heard this, Pitter asks her for some information about Jack, and Salamandra informs him that he seems to be taking good care of Mary. Aside from that, Phil trusts him, so even though Jack might hate their guts, Phil still believes he'll be loyal till the end. Curious, Pitter asks her why Phil places so much trust in his childhood friend, but then Salamandra tells him that Phil refers to Jack as a man who will follow through on his decision. Having met and discussed with Jack a few times, Pitter realizes Phil is telling the truth. As soon as they both conclude on that matter, the L-Zone monster suddenly reacts violently, scarring both Pitter and Salamandra. Soon enough, the L-Zone dies down, and they both soon realize that Mary, the core of the monster, is the one trolling them all along. With this, the scene ends, and the next scene opens in a flashback to an event that happened at the Shadow Residence 13 years ago. On that fateful night, the world came together to celebrate the creation of the engraving technology that Eric Baker's father, Benedetto Baker, or Ben Baker for short, created. While the party progresses, Ben can be seen looking as gloomy as ever, with many of his buddies doing their best to cheer him up, and some even trying to get him wasted. In the meantime, little Jorg is seen in a corner trying to rizz up some ladies, and Reese, the future major and leader of the VC3, strolls the entire party area in search of something new. Just then, Mona Shadow, Jack's mother at the time, calls everyone's attention and gives them a very light opening speech before finally introducing the famous creator of the engraving technology to the crowd, and ushering him to the podium to say a thing or two about his tech to the attendees. By the time Eric's father mounts the podium, Reese searches the crowd for his son, Eric, and soon finds the uninterested gamer playing games as usual. Irritated, Reese walks toward him and scolds him for not being there to listen to his father, but then Eric just ignores her and continues playing his game. After trying to talk to him about Sapientia, the world-renowned AI, to no avail, Reese just gives up and focuses on the speech being said. Very soon after, Eric's father messes up and gets scolded by Mona on the podium. Although Reese finds this weird, her attention is soon quickly shifted somewhere else when she hears someone playing the piano in a dark room beyond some closed doors. At first, she ignores the sound, but then it gets more consistent, and she eventually goes to check it out. Upon opening a few doors, including the giant entrance one, Reese finally finds Jack by the piano playing the tune he and his old buddy, Phil, used to play back when they were younger. Curious, Reese inches closer to him and asks him about the song, but Jack tells her he neither knows the title nor the singer of the song. Despite hearing that, Reese sits near the lonely boy after recognizing him as the boy the Shadow family adopted, and plays that exact tune on the piano so nicely that she causes Jack to remember the times he used to jam the song with his old buddy. When she's done playing the song, she asks for Jack's thoughts, and Jack, severely impressed by her skill, introduces himself as Jack, and, upon finding out Reese's name, begs her to play the tune again. Touched by his love for her talent, Reese happily plays the tune over and over again till they both get tired and fall asleep. Just then, the flashback ends, and Reese wakes up to Ozma, urging her to get her head back in the game. Upon apologizing for dozing off, Reese gets to the cockpit and tells both Inanna and their new member, Niger, to play the message their spy, Lewis, sent to them. When they finally play the audio, the entire team gets to hear the deranged fool talk about finding the ship that their target, Mary, is on, and marking it so it's easy to spot. Right after getting the needed information, Reese turns off the recording and listens to her team member talk about the person who approved Lewis's hiring. In time, the team wishes Dwan and Zoan were still around to help them out, but then again, they quickly stop talking about them, seeing as they're still on the list and get their heads back in the game. As soon as they spot the Joint Army's fleet, Reese commences their operation and orders everyone to man their positions while they still can. Realizing the first HQ's fleet is below them, Reese orders the pilots to fly a bit lower and blend in. Once they get past that, Jorg stares at the movement of the L-Zone monster on the ground and thinks about Jack and Mary. When Dahlia, another one of their members, asks him why he looks distracted, Bro lies and tells her that he's just thinking about how the monster's movements resembled the omelets his mother used to make. Around that time, Ozma exposes his joke, and Jorg does his best to keep it up. Soon after, they enter the combat zone and get serious by evading as many attacks as they can till they get to their marked ship by speeding up as quickly as they can. When they get get much closer to the L-Zone, Niger gets a little shocked and impressed, seeing as how the Moon Chain's fleet is controlling the L-Zone monsters like they're nothing. In time, he ignores the sight and focuses on getting them much closer to the marked ship. After evading and speeding up a few more times, they finally get to their marked ship, which happens to be the enemy's flagship. Reese takes a moment to prepare herself for what to expect, but unfortunately for them, the ship's bots quickly attach themselves to the Stingray to protect the enemy's flagship. To prevent any damage from occurring to the Stingray, Niger increases the ship's speed and flies as fast as possible to dust off the bots attaching themselves to the ship. When they eventually get the bots off, they fly up toward the flagship's hangar, do a loop around the hangar one time, and slightly manage to get into the enemy ship right before the hangar closes. As soon as they land on the enemy ship, dozens of Moonchain soldiers rush them, and the VC3 members engage them all in a crossfire. Amid all the chaos, Reese, Jorg, and Ozma all slip past the enemy lines and eventually manage to get through to the upper deck. Moments before they arrive, Salamandra asks for an update on the situation from Pitter, and he tells her the situation. Realizing there's no time to waste, Salamandra figures her worst fear is coming through, so she gets prepared to fight whoever comes her way. Around this time, Jorg, who's seen running through the corridor with Reese, recalls one of the strategy meetings they all had before embarking on this mission. Back then, Niger asked them about the whereabouts of Jack and General Pitter over the past year, but since there was nothing to say about them, they all shifted to discuss the current state of things in the north. With the northern forces retreating, Inanna informs everyone that the first HQ plans to attack the Moon Chain fleet, as they all believe Mary, the core, will be there on one of the ships. Before they move forward, Ozma asks the others to explain why the rebel army is moving the L-Zone to Copernicus City, a city they fought so hard to protect when the L-Zone only knows destruction. With no answers in sight, Inanna reiterates the fact that the first HQ surely can't afford to lose Copernicus City to the L-Zone. As such, their mission as the VC3 will be to seize the target amid the chaos and bring their spy, Lewis, back to base. With all that said, the flashback ends, and Jorg blows up a few things inside the corridor with an ECM to disrupt the communications, as well as the power system in the ship. Seconds after the explosion, the upper deck loses its eyesight on the ship and is soon unable to track the invaders. With the tension growing, Pitter gives the orders to activate backup power, but unfortunately, it's already too late for that, as Reese and the other two guys force their way into the upper deck to fight and recapture Mary, the L-Zone's core. In the first moments of their infiltration, all three VC3 fighters work together to fight and take down as many guards as they can to clear a path for them to find and recapture Mary. At one point in the fight, Reese gets to face the ex-General Pitter, but soon enough, the boys, Ozma, and Jorg face Salamandra, who happily takes on both of them in a lovely fashion. With the stage set, Reese asks the general to reveal the person giving him orders, but then Pitter, impressed by her newfound ability to question everything, compliments her maturity and chats with her. Unable to entertain his babble any further, Reese asks for Mary's location and attacks him. In the meantime, Jorg and Ozma shoot Salamandra with everything they've got, but nothing works against the Woman of Steel. Eventually, Ozma just blindly charges at her, only to miss her completely and get knocked the hell out. Nearby, Reese overpowers Pitter like he was nothing and somehow manages to pin him against the wall. Realizing he can't win, Pitter tries to make a run for it, but Reese catches up to him and shoots him in the head, killing him. By this time, Reese orders Jorg and Ozma to join her to bring this down, and, soon enough, the three of them manage to create an opening even Salamandra can't block. Just as Reese shoots her shot at her, Mary shows up in the nick of time and blocks the bullets. Soon after, Jack shows up right after and happily says hi to everyone on the ship, telling them that it's been a long time since they saw each other. As soon as Reese and the others set their eyes on their rebel buddy, Jack, life ceases to exist for them as they struggle to understand how and why Jack would side with the rebel army for an entire year. Mind you, the first HQ's fleet is now overpowering the Moonchain fleet, and so, numerous bombs were sent to the enemy flagship, aka the ship everybody's on, to cause as much damage as possible. With no time to waste, Jorg snaps out of his feelings and, after screaming out Jack's name, attacks him as hard as he can. While throwing some of his hardest punches yet, poor Jorg asks Jack why he joined and survived in the rebel army for an entire year. Jack, on the other hand, urges him to stop fighting him, as he explains that it's because he has his stuff to do as well. By this time, Salamandra, having had her life saved by Mary earlier, shows up and kicks the out of Jorg like clockwork. When Jack scolds her for going too hard on Jorg, Salamandra assures him that she went easy on him. With that said, she apologizes for making Jack see his buddies again, despite not wanting to, and advises them to abandon the ship before it's too late. Upon checking up on Mary's well-being, Jack looks over to check on Ozma and Reese, only to see a very disappointed Reese just standing there, shell-shocked. In time, he sucks it all up and accepts Salamandra's advice, and then Salamandra makes a hole in the ship, causing the insane air pressure outside to seep in, jumps out of the ship with the other two, and latches herself as well as the other two to another ship. Shortly after they're gone, Georg rushes over to seal the hole Salamandra created earlier. Once done, he calls Reese for his next order, but unfortunately, Reese can't do at that moment, as she's still shocked from seeing Jack's face again. Right after getting into the next ship, Salamandra assumes command and finally manages to figure out an escape path. At the same time, Rhys, Ozma, and Jorg quickly return to the Stingray and get the hell out of there before they all get blown up in the enemy flagship. As Salamandra's new ship zooms off into the horizon, Jack looks down on the Stingray one more time before it disappears out of sight, hopefully to be seen no more. A few hours later, a bunch of high-ranking officials from Earth, putting on strange white robes, arrange a meeting in front of a large glowing globe with weird rings inside. While in the meeting, they all discuss the possibility of the new core of the L-Zone, Mary, being a threat to them, but then figure that since she's now moving with Seed 4, aka Wiz B, she should be easier to control from the outside. Unable to just sit idly by and watch, seeing as Seed 1, Jack, is also with them, they all turn to one of their highly respected members, Mr. Landry, and ask if he's done with the preparations. By this time, Landry, who's also in the meeting, assures them that Sapientia promises that all issues will be resolved once the core, aka Mary, is eliminated. With all that said, the meeting ends, and everyone disperses. In the next scene, Zoan and Dwan are seen in Copernicus trying to figure out why the rebels would want to destroy Copernicus right after occupying it. Before they get their answer, however, the Stingray zooms past them, and Zoan, right after taking out and staring at a certain chip, urges Dwan to follow her back to base. In another part of the moon, Jack's seen walking into a private VIP lounge to join Windy and Harbinger, as the crazy commander on the Moonchain forces hosts an event with the rebel supporters to update them on their plans and keep their hopes alive in the Moonchain rebellion. When he gets to the lounge, he listens to the crazy fool give a generic opening speech before finally welcoming the leader of the rebellion, Bob Skylum, to address everyone. While Bob approaches the podium to give his speech, Windy trash talks the crazy commander, but then keeps her mouth shut when Bob Skylum finally takes the microphone to give his speech. When the speech begins, she gets up, asks Jack to divulge some information about his former unit, and then takes her leave, frowning, when Jack refuses to give her any critical information about the VC-3. Shortly after leaving Jack to his thing, Windy gets sent a picture of Rhys and Jorg in their combat suits by an unknown contact and checks it out, wondering where they are that instant. A few hours after the speech, Mary joins Jack, who's busy playing an update on the game he and Eric used to play, on a random balcony, and, after getting some useless information about the game, apologizes for causing him so much trouble. After assuring her that it's all good, Jack turns to Wiz B, who's always close to Mary, and then asks if it's okay to always let the robot be close to her at all times. He knows that Wiz B helps her control the L-Zone monster, but even at that, he finds it weird that they're always together. Hearing this, Mary tells him that much distance is okay, and the robot starts showing off. Getting past that, Mary asks Jack if he feels weird about her being the core of the L-Zone, and Jack tells her her obligation doesn't change who she is. In time, she asks the guy about his relationship with Phil, and Jack tells her that he just finds it ironic that he, who came to the moon to get revenge on Bob Skylum for causing the deaths of his parents and friend, would eventually get confused on who to hate. Nevertheless, he urges Mary not to get worried about him, as he will do what he has to do eventually. Around this time, Wisby shocks Jack in the hand and mocks him. When Jack reacts to the robot, it annoys him even more, making Mary chuckle at the sight of them. A few dozen miles away, in Copernicus's Stadia City, Rhys, Dahlia, and a few other VC3 members are seen roaming about the streets undercover, hoping to hear something about Moonchain, or the L-Zone's movement. In time, Rhys overhears two fools talking about getting to a neutral zone, and makes sure to keep her cover. Meanwhile, Dahlia reports back to Lewis after asking a few refugees about the L-Zone monster's movement to Copernicus. So far, she tells Lewis nobody knows about it, and then they both search for Rhys. Before they get to that, they spot a moon civilian maltreating some orphans from Earth, who are just looking for something to eat, and Dahlia gets so pissed at the fool that she loses control, forgets she's undercover, and beats the living out of the man. Soon after, the others notice her skin tone and color, and soon figure out that she's from Earth. Before any more harm comes to Dahlia, Rhys swoops in and knocks the other men out. In the meantime, Windy arrives at the Moonchain ship and asks the others if they've found the VC3 members yet. When she finds out that they haven't done that yet, as the VC3 members are quite evasive, she throws a fit, seeing as she's not the sit-and-wait type, and asks them all if they're hungry. By this time, Salamandra tells her about the moon beef they bought earlier, and Windy, happy to finally hear that, rushes over to the table to eat it. Unfortunately for her, she only finds Harbinger there on a full stomach and chastises him for eating all the meat. Just then, one of the trackers gets a hit on the VC3 and pulls the footage over to the screen for them all to see. Having realized how dangerous the VC3 is, simply because they killed Pitter, the crazy commander urges them to take care of them in time before they foil all their plans. Right after agreeing to his sentiment, Salamandra calls Harbinger and Windy and orders them to get to Stadia City so they can take care of the VC3 unit stationed there. Around that time, Rhys and Dahlia are already surrounded by the angry moon citizens. Thankfully, before anything out of the ordinary happens, Lewis swoops in and gets the duo out of there. On their way back to base, Dahlia apologizes for ruining their mission. But then again, Lewis blames Rhys for bringing such a volatile person along with them. Back on the Stingray, Inanna finally gets to talk to calm Jorg for the first time after the incident. Upon reminding him how loud he screamed when he saw Jorg a few days ago, she assures him that he's still the same person he was a year ago. Hearing this, Jorg regrets not stopping Jack, by all means the previous year. But then, when Inanna asks if he regrets not saving him, he tells her not in the slightest, as he knows Jack probably had his reasons. Just when he's about to say something else, Inanna calls them both close friends, which irks Jorg, and then mentions just how jealous she is of what he has. With all that said though, she does warn him to stop worrying or thinking about the guy so it doesn't cloud his judgment the next time they meet. Around that time, Niger reports that they're being chased, and they instantly jerk back to action, as they do their best to get away from the Moonchain forces. At the same time, Lewis, Reese, and Dahlia all approach the Stingray vehicle on their smaller flying machines, and urge Inanna to keep driving the Stingray forward while she follows them behind, so the enemies don't catch up to them. Soon after driving a few more meters, Novice Harbinger shows up and destroys Reese's flying saucer. Almost immediately, Inanna turns the Stingray around, hoping to get to Reese and recover before she's surrounded. Sadly, before they can get to her, the Moonchain ship approaches them. With no other choice, Inanna keeps moving forward so they don't get wiped out. Before they go out of sight, Jorg tells his people to keep his seat warm for him while he goes back to recover their team leader, Reese. With nobody to object to his decision, Jorg alights the Stingray and retraces their steps. A few dozen meters behind, Windy and the rest of the squad finally get to Harbinger's location to say hi to their new prisoner, Reese. Some moments before Harbinger and Windy arrive with Reese, Jack visits Eric's grave alone at the Copernicus's bottom-level district to reminisce on his old life and reflect on his decisions. While he stares at Eric's grave, Jack's mind flashes back to the moment he had the most important discussion of his life with Phil. In a flashback to that exact moment, Phil listens to Jack call him a trashy person for preaching all about peace, only to end up fighting and killing in the end. But when he gets fed up of all the yap, he asks Jack if he really trusts Sapientia, the AI that rules all. With Jack remaining silent, Phil tells him that while the people of Earth eat good food, wear good clothes, and follow the AI's orders like mindless robots, all that unprocessed waste and ambition get dumped on the moon, as per Sapientia's recommendations. Having said all that, Phil tells Jack that he now knows that true peace will never return to the moon, because, for now, all the people of the moon know is conflict and strife. Even when they proposed countless peace negotiations to the people on Earth, Sapientia blinded the Earthlings' minds by letting them know that it's impossible to forge a peaceful sovereign nation through talks. When Jack eventually asks Phil if that's why he caused the collapse of the orbital shaft, Phil says no, and then tries to tell him that they didn't do any of that. Before telling the real truth about the incident, Phil takes a detour in the conversation and tells Jack the truth about who they truly are, as well as what caused the incineration of the Earthlings that day. Back in the present time, Windy and Harbinger, on their way back to the Moonchain base, sense something eerily wrong with how easy it was for them to capture Reese, seeing as she's the one who killed Pitter herself. Upon grasping at straws, the duo concludes they must be careful handling her so she doesn't catch them off guard. At the Moonchain base, Phil's seen chilling out with his eyes closed as he recalls the day the Abaddon, aka the facility where he and Jack grew up, crashed into the moon. Soon after the crash, young Phil collapsed and only woke up a few days later, in the hands of some people he didn't even know. During that time, the poor dude struggled to get out of bed with his right arm gone, but eventually, when he found Wisby beside him, his gloomy face disappeared, and he petted the poor robot. Over time, young Phil recovers, and he slowly eases up to his new family, enjoying whatever time he had with them in the past. Unfortunately, his good days soon came to an end on the day the Joint Army attacked the moon city of Copernicus and killed hundreds of moon civilians. Upon hearing the first blast, Phil rushed to the city to check out the damage, but when he got there, the only thing he found were ruthless soldiers shooting down innocent civilians like they were fodder. Determined to survive, little Phil ran as fast as he could away from all the fighting and death till he finally returned to the site of the Abaddon's crash after a long journey. With newfound curiosity, Phil and Wisby navigated through the dark remains of the abandoned ship to learn more about his and Jack's origins. When he finally gets to the room where they were born, everything suddenly makes sense to him. Just as the present Phil snaps out of his flashback, Harbinger and Windy's ship returns with Reese, the leader of the VC-3, on board. Upon docking, the Moonchain soldiers strip Reese of her engraved suit and lock her up in a special, electrified cage. Moments later, Phil takes the form of Bob Skylum and visits her in her cell. There, he says a few good things about her engraved suit, before telling her a thing or two about the cage she's being locked up in. For all he knows, it's a special cage made by the Joint Army to keep those they think are aberrant away from escaping. By this time, Reese calls Bob desperate to go that far, all in the name of saving the people of the moon, and, in response, Bob accuses her and the other Earthlings of blindly threatening the moon with war based on an AI's recommendations without even questioning the AI's objectives. Hearing this, Reese outrightly refuses to let Bob Skylum's words get to her, as she blames him for the deaths of millions of people right after the orbital shaft's collapse, and then continues to call him a murderous terrorist who preaches peace. Realizing Reese might be right, Bob accepts all the accusations and leaves her in the cell right after telling her that they can never see eye to eye. As he waltzes away from the special cage, Phil, aka Bob Skylum, resumes the first flashback, the one where he tells Jack the truth about who he truly is. To continue their discussion, Phil reveals to Jack that he's the first artificial sapien species, Seed 1, developed for space exploration situation by Sapientia and her minions. Having heard this, a troubled Jack wonders if Phil's also an artificial sapien just like him. Before thinking for too long, Phil happily tells him that he's Seed 2, an artificially designed sapien to be Jack's spare. Even at that, Phil still tells him that his gene sequence can accelerate or halt things around him via other seeds, meaning he's not so different from the other humans without the other seeds around. When Phil also breaks it to Jack that his hidden command was left on their crashed ship, Abaddon, Jack loses his and struggles to forget the yes or no window that appeared to him on the day of the orbital shaft collapse. For all he knows, Phil continues to tell Jack that his genetic sequence has an electronic toxin for triggering Abaddon's self-destruction should the worst happen. In other words, the hidden command is a security hole that activates on his command, and has been operating quietly due to Phil's right hand, aka Whiz B. Upon muttering a few more jargon words, Phil finally reveals that the thing responsible for causing the collapse of the orbital shaft is none other than Sapientia. As the flashback pauses, we get to see the current Jack rushing toward Reese's prison cell to talk to her. Thankfully, before he gets there, Mary catches up to him and stops him from causing more trouble by seeing the already broken Reese. To further keep his mind at peace, Mary assures him that Reese is still safe in the cell, even if things go south. With all that said, Jack finally returns to his quarters and rests easily. Moments later, Mary reveals to the other Moon Chain commanders, during their chill time, that Reese and Jack are dating, and although they keep denying it, it's the absolute truth. This catches the others by surprise, but still, they make sure to keep their guards up as they all feel that the Major is hiding something. For a moment, Salamandra suggests she's probably on the ship to see Jacob, but then Wendy and the others quickly brush that aside as they feel that it seems highly unlikely. Just then, something triggers one of the traps they placed elsewhere, and Wendy and Harbinger leave the ship in Mary's hands to go investigate what got into their trap. In the meantime, the other VC3 members, having lost their team leader, Reese, go into depression, with many of them, including the emotional Dahlia and Lewis, struggling to keep their sadness in. Before things go out of hand, Ozma stops the two from their banter, and then shakes Inanna, who's lost in thought, so she can say something to the group as a whole. Upon apologizing for spacing out, Inanna tells them to stand by while she reports the situation with Reese to the higher-ups and awaits further instructions. Shortly afterward, Inanna gets her alone time and stares at the communications device her sister gave her earlier before leaving for some time, and wonders where she is at that moment. As it turns out, her sister, just as she was about to leave the VC3 base for another assignment with Duan, said a few things about Jack that didn't make sense to her. When she was done yapping, she gave Inanna the communication device and urged her to use it to contact her directly once she encountered trouble. Hearing this, Inanna talks about the device revealing their location, and Zoan jokes around a little before finally boarding her saucer. With the engines fired up and ready to leave, Zoan advises her sister, Inanna, to be very careful around Reese and Jorg, as even though they're good people, they're too straightforward, and in her experience, people like that are usually the most dangerous ones around. With all that said, Zoan lifts the craft and zooms off into the moon. Upon recollecting such a precious memory, Inanna stares at the device and wonders if now will be a good time to call Zoan in. Just then, Ozma shows up and startles her, but then, after getting a scolding from Inanna, he talks about how weird Reese and Jorg are, most especially Jorg, for leaving his woman, aka Inanna, to him just like that. Having heard this, Inanna flares up as she doesn't expect to be called Jorg's woman, and Ozma updates her on the move the joint army plans to make the next day. As soon as he's done talking, Ozma spots the Moon Chain drones hovering all over the joint army base, and does his best to hide himself and Inanna out of their sight. Just then, Dahlia rushes to tell them something, but before she can speak, a tremor happens, and they all rush back to receive orders. Meanwhile, Zoan and Duan are seen hacking into the Moon Chain's database, right after busting into their server farm and taking out a few guards. After fiddling around with code for a while, Zoan finally manages to decipher the rebel army's operation code, but is then shocked when she finds no information about L-Zone. Upon digging in further, she finds out about the hiding spots of the rebel army operatives around town, and yaps about the awful memories she has of them. Soon after sifting through other garbage information, she finally pulls up live footage of Reese, inside the special cage on the Moon Chain's base, and tells Duan about it. With the stage set, Zoan gets up and urges Duan to follow her to rescue Reese, hoping her sister's okay. Around this time, Salamandra visits Reese in her cell, and then, right after getting past the small talk, asks her if she's Jack's girlfriend. Shocked, Reese changes her gloomy expression to a nervous one, and then asks Salamandra if that's what Jack told her earlier. Upon telling her exactly what Mary told them, Salamandra urges her to clarify things now, as she's not the only one after Jack at that moment. With all that said, she gets dangerously close to Reese, and asks again if she plans on having a happy ending with him. In response, Reese tells Salandra that Jack's a deserter who will face harsh punishment after undergoing the proper procedures. Hearing this, Salamandra pushes procedure aside, and then asks Reese to divulge what she truly wants to happen in her heart, hoping she would somehow admit to wanting to help Jack so she can eventually help plan their escape from the moon. Around this time, Reese figures out Salamandra's plan, and then tells her that her only objective is to fulfill her mission and nothing more. Realizing Reese's focus is only on her mission, Salamandra leaves the platform, calls Reese a boring person, and then hopes that her plan eventually works out for good, so she'll never be able to see Jack again in her entire life. To her, love is a battlefield, and since they're in real life, not a movie, Salamandra tells Reese that they don't always get what they want. With all that said, she wishes Reese well and takes her leave. Shortly after leaving, Salamandra informs Phil that even though she's confirmed that Rhys plans to capture Mary, she still has something up her sleeve, so they should be careful. Having heard this, Phil thanks Salamandra for the help, and soon realizes that Sapientia might be aiding her all along. Just then, Jack storms into the room asking after Rhys, but then Phil, after assuring him that Rhys is doing just fine, asks him if he's ready for what's to come. Upon telling his buddy that he hates him, Jack promises to follow through with his plan as he knows what's at stake. Also, right after assuring him that he won't let him carry such a burden alone again, Jack tells his buddy to make sure he keeps the promise they made to each other once they're done with the fighting. With teary eyes, Phil thanks him for the help, and then remembers the first time he reconnected with Jack on the day of the orbital shaft collapse. Apparently, after only seeing Jack for just a few moments in the weird electronic trance world, Phil touched Jack for, and almost instantly, Sapientia rebooted and pulled him back to the moon. Before he gets sucked away, Phil asks Jack to lend him his strength for the sake of the moon. But then, when he gets back to Sapientia's world, he works together with Wiz B, his right arm at the time, to see himself out of that crazy world. Eventually, Bro wakes up in the safety of his ship, only to find Wiz B oozing out smoke as it crashes down temporarily from the stress. Before he knows it, various screens appear in front of him, and soon enough, Phil sees the infamous video of Bob Skylum declaring war on all of Earth right after the collapse of the orbital shaft. Although that wasn't in their plan, Phil went along with it and did his best to stop it. One time, he involuntarily attacks the real Bob Skylum, who begs to be killed so he can finally be free from Sapientia's control, and then tells him that the people of the moon need him now more than ever, especially since he's declared war on the Earthlings. By this time, the real Bob tells Phil that there was never a Bob Skylum to begin with, but to keep the hope of the moon people alive, he attaches his electronic necklace thingy to Phil and names him the new Moon King, Bob Skylum. With this, Phil takes on his new assignment as the fake Bob Skylum, returns to reality, and, while staring out the window, tells Jack that the new dawn for the moon begins soon. Around that time, the L-Zone monster finally arrives at Copernicus and surrounds it. Elsewhere, Harbinger and Windy are seen throwing fits when they get to the VC-3 hideout and realize that they've already escaped. As if escaping wasn't enough, the VC-3 made sure to leave a Pegasus sign somewhere on the wall to signify their freedom and will. Seeing this, Windy freaks the hell out, but eventually stops when one of the rebel soldiers reports that they've found an escape route to their hangar. Unable to let the VC-3 foil their plans, Windy and Harbinger head out in pursuit of the VC-3 soldiers. At that same moment, the first HQ's fleet drops a few ballistic bombs on the L-Zone monster, which has apparently now surrounded Copernicus City, fully expecting it to do some damage to the monster. Sadly, as soon as the bombs explode, the L-Zone monster fuses back together and continues moving toward Copernicus. Realizing that their explosives, which are supposed to be 5 times that of a normal one, didn't work. Clemenza gets very frustrated as he tries to figure out Bob Skylum's endgame. On the other side of the battlefield, the crazy commander, later identified to be Commander Wise, teams with joy over anticipating the look on Clemenza's face, now that his last resort didn't work. With no time to waste, the bastard unleashes hellfire on the first HQ's fleet and begins the second battle in a long time. In the meantime, Inanna and what's left of the VC-3 team navigate their way through the dilapidated roads and highways to get further into the city. While on the way, Dahlia asks Inanna, the interim captain, for instructions. But just as Inanna's about to say something, Lewis, the driver, notices Harbinger in front of them and speeds up the vehicle, hoping to run him over. As soon as the vehicle gets close to the monster, Harbinger stops it with his bare hands and prevents any further movement from the VC-3. Very soon, Windy and the rest of the Seed 3 soldiers show up to stop any resistance from the VC-3 members. Back at the Moon Chain base, Zoan and Dwan somehow manage to gain access to Rhys's cell. Right after saying hi, Zoan gets to work on hacking into the Special Cage's system so she can finally free Rhys from its clutches. While that happens, Wise continues raving mad in his ship, but then Salamandra, on the other hand, does her best to keep Mary's head in the game, as she's understandably worried about the entire situation. Having heard Salamandra's sweet words, Mary assures her that she's okay, but she's more worried about Phil and Jack as she feels something bad might happen to them. At that moment, Phil expresses some of his concerns about what's happening to Jack, who's eager to know what the matter is. As it turns out, Phil just doesn't understand why Sapientia would send Rhys to them, because if Rhys's main mission is to kill Bob Skylum, then he just can't understand why she would be after Mary. Realizing that his girlfriend would only deviate from the mission based on Sapientia's orders, Jack tells Phil that she may be doing this because she's planning to use the L-Zone for something. Concurring with his thoughts, Phil tells Jack that Rhys will surely come for them, so he should be ready. Around that time, Zoan finally manages to hack into the Cage's system and free Rhys. Unfortunately for Zoan, who is expecting a thank you from Rhys, Rhys calls her and Dwan traitors as she walks out of the cell. As Dwan and Zoan are about to react, Jorg shows up, electrocutes Dwan, and gives Rhys an engraved taser, which she, in turn, uses to knock Zoan out. Right after doing that, Jorg asks about her well-being, and Rhys, upon assuring him him that she's alright, heaves a sigh of relief for finally being on the ship. At that point, Reese remembers what she did to the Seed 3 mother organism when she arrived at the abandoned facility some moments back. Upon arriving and activating the Seed 3's mother robot, Reese engages it in some meaningless conversation before finally switching up and attacking all the bots guarding the mother robot. Thereafter, taking care of the bots, Reese jumped on top of the mother bot, stabbed it with a digital device, and did something very weird to its code. Now that she's fully equipped and prepared to activate whatever virus she inputted into the Seed 3's mother bot via Sapientia's orders, Reese engraves a flash drive and plugs it into the Moonchain Command's mainframe. Upon running a few lines of code, she finally hacks into the command system of all Seed 3 robots and turns them all against the Moonchain warriors. Suddenly, the attack robots that used to be under the Moonchain's control switch up and start attacking their allies. In all the chaos and confusion, Wendy gets kicked into a building by one of her attack bots, but just as she's about to get back out to the street to fight the VC3 and the Seed 3 attack bots, she spots a few civilians hiding inside the building, and then asks them why they haven't been evacuated yet. The kids in there tell her that it's because they have no other place to call home. Realizing what's at stake here, Wendy destroys the attack bot that followed her into the building, and instructs Harbinger and the rest of the human guards to lead the civilians to underground safety. So, for a moment, Harbinger leaves Ozma and the rest and works on getting the civilians to a safe place. At a point during the evacuation, an attack bot overpowers the human soldier guarding the kids and nearly kills the kids themselves. Thankfully, Inanna grows a pair and shoots the robot to oblivion before the kids get harmed, and wonders why the bots are switching. As Phil, Jack, and the others are about to take off from the base, Jorg and Reese arrive, and Reese shoots at them, just as they're about to close the hangar. Without fail, she recognizes Phil to be the guy from the church and keeps a straight face. In time, Phil orders her to explain what she did to the Seed 3 mother, and Reese assures him that they owe him no explanation. Just then, Jorg speaks up and tells Jack to hand Mary over, with Reese threatening to use force if they don't comply. But when Jack and Phil refuse to let them in, Reese shoots the hangar open and gets past them to go further into the ship to find Mary. Almost immediately, Jack goes after her, leaving Phil to handle Jorg and the other bots. At that time, Salamandra's just about to take off and leave Copernicus, when suddenly, the attack bots holding onto the ship bust a hole in their window pane. As Jack's about to catch up to Reese, an attack bot breaks into the corridor and holds him off. With the gravity shift, Jack gets seriously pissed at the annoying robot and destroys it without breaking a sweat. Shortly afterward, Reese finally gets to Mary, who's deep inside the ship, and unapologetically shoots at her. Thankfully, with Whiz-Bee on her hands, Mary doesn't get hurt, but then she tries to get Reese to calm down so they can talk things out. Unfortunately, the foolish girl is already far gone, as she continues trying to kill Mary. When Whiz-Bee finally fights back, Reese finds herself dodging and avoiding its dangerous laser beams. Soon after, Jack manages to get to them, but before they can discuss anything, Salamandra loses control over the ship due to the incessant attacks from the attack bots, and then crashes it into the outer wall of Copernicus City. Back on the chaotic streets of the city, Inanna and the other VC3 members are left wondering why the attack bots are attacking the people of the moon. For a moment, they suggest that maybe this is the Moonchain's way of showing their true colors, but then again, after seeing how hard Wendy and Harbinger are fighting to protect the civilians from the bots, they realize that's not the case at all. Around that time, Inanna and the rest of the members spot the incredible duo fighting the bots with all their might, cursing at Sapientia for causing this bull any way they can. Just as an attack bot's about to take them down, Ozma protects them and tells them that although his mission is to capture them, he and his teammates can't ignore what's happening right in front of them. With all that said, they continue yapping hapless nonsense, which irritates Wendy. So she tells them that all this bullshit they feel they're not supposed to see was caused by none other than Sapientia herself. This news takes Inanna and the others by surprise, but before they pass off Wendy's theories as nonsense, Zoan tells her sister via the communication device that Wendy is speaking the truth. A few minutes after the Moonchain ship crash, Salamandra regains consciousness and, although battered, continues to complete the mission. By then, Jack carries his lovely young woman, Reese, toward the soft moon sand, but then spots two attack robots handling Mary and trying to rip Whiz-Bee off her arm. Unable to do Jack watches the bots not only rip Whiz-Bee off Mary's hand, but also temporarily disable the bot. As he's about to jump in to save her, Jorg shows up and holds him down. Around that time, Zoan talks to Inanna and the rest of the VC3 team about ignoring Sapientia's instructions and doing what's right, which is protecting their friends and family. As for Jorg, who refuses to let Jack go, he urges him to let Sapientia do her job, so they can move past all that and be better people. But, right before the attack bots finish her off, Phil shoots them down and collapses after seeing how bad things are with Mary and Whiz-Bee. Just then, Reese gets dangerously close to Mary, points her gun at the struggling girl, and, after mentioning how she spent her entire life obeying Sapientia, tearfully asks Jack why he would leave her without telling her anything. With no response given, Reese turns to Mary and readies herself to take the life of an innocent girl. As she recalls all the sweet memories she's had with Mary, tears fill her face, as she finally stops herself from doing the deed as per Sapientia's orders. With this, she turns to Jack, crying her eyes out, and asks Jack what he must think of her. Just then, without warning, Sapientia hacks into Reese's engraving suit and forcefully creates a prosthetic arm, which forces Reese to aim her pistol at a stressed Mary. While screaming to be saved from the crazy AI's grasp, Reese unintentionally shoots Mary. The moment Mary gets shot, L-Zone starts behaving erratically, and Commander Wise, who notices the change, wonders what will happen next. In the meantime, Jack rushes over to check up on Reese, who just stands there frozen, and Mary, whose body starts going haywire. Right before she explodes, the poor girl looks at Jack and Phil one more time, apologizes for what's about to happen, and then urges them to run for dear life. Thereafter, she releases a humongous field of energy that turns the entire L-Zone monster red. This change in color causes a very violent reaction from the L-Zone monster, as the whole mass of red goo rushes toward Mary's location and carries the unconscious girl away from her friends. Unable to do anything, Jack and the others get to see the large L-Zone attack and take down as many joint army ships as possible. Realizing the danger they're in, Wise orders the Moonchain fleet to retreat to a safer spot so they don't get crushed by the angry monster. Soon after, the L-Zone monster manages to seep through the Copernicus city's defensive barrier and attacks every living soul it finds in there. While the war continues on the moon, the Council of Sapientian Elders meet to discuss the creativity and usefulness of the L-Zone, citing how it reshapes humanity into what it wants, like the E2 material and whatnot. In any case, things won't go as the Moonchains planned, but then again, they all conclude that terraforming is necessary for the development of the ever-growing species of humans. While Phil and the others wonder where the L-Zone took Mary, Jack walks up to Reese and uses his engraving tech to destroy the prosthetic hand Sapientia created on Reese. Shortly after doing the deed, Phil returns to check up on him, and Jack assures him that he's doing okay. Right after placing Jorg in charge of caring for Reese, Phil and Jack get to see where Mary's being kept. For a moment, Jack figures that maybe the monster's trying to evolve. However, before he can confirm that, Salamandra shows up on her vehicle and ushers them to get on, so they can all go together and help save Mary and the moon. Realizing that they can't let things end there, Phil and Wisby quickly get to work while Jack stays behind, hugs Reese, and promises to return to her once he's done saving the world. At this point, Reese smiles and wishes him good luck on his endeavors. With the stage set, Jack gears up, gets on Phil's vehicle, and rides with his childhood buddy to Mary's location. Moments before they get to Mary's position, something weird happens to the Seed 3 mother robot back on the abandoned facility, and she shuts down momentarily. This, in turn, causes a chain reaction that makes the rogue attack bots also shut down, clearing some space between Phil and the L-Zone monster. By this time, Reese finally gets her normal self back and fights the other attack bots, alongside Jorg and Salamandra, who surprisingly helped them take down the bots like they were nothing. Right after taking down the bots, Salamandra phones Harbinger and Windy and informs them that the L-Zone has not only gone wild, but has also hidden Mary in a core high up in the Copernicus orbital shaft. Upon confirming that they read her, Salamandra surprisingly patches Reese and Jorg through their channel, and the duo gets to hear Windy and Harbinger complain about how crazy the Seed 3 attack bots are being to them, as they're currently stopping them from evacuating. Hearing this, Salamandra tells everyone that since Phil and Jack are coming their way, she's going to need a favor from them. While she explains the favor, Jack and Phil continue shooting at the attack robots coming at them, in hopes of getting closer to Mary. When he eventually realizes that the bots are getting way too many for him, Jack calls in a favor from Wise, and Wise, right after complaining about them being busy, rains some bullets down on the bots attacking Phil and Jack's vehicle. Upon driving a few more meters through the L-Zone monster, Phil and Jack finally get a signal from the end of the shaft. Determined to get up there, Phil amps the vehicle's speed and drives as fast as he can with Jack behind. While they approach the entrance of the orbital shaft, Duan signals Zoan about Jack's arrival, and the hacker speeds up her hacking so she can take care of the attack bots before they halt Phil and Jack's mission. While she's on it, Phil and Jack jump off their vehicle and take to the skies so they can get to the end of the shaft in time. At the same time, the L-Zone monster and the attack bots keep doing their best to halt their mission, but thankfully, with Windy and Harbinger's help, Phil and Jack can easily move past the threats. Once they get past their level, Phil and Jack encounter yet another level of attack bots and mini L-Zone monsters. But this time, Inanna and Ozma help them out and make them promise to hear the complaints later. As Jack and Phil continue moving toward the top, Zoan finally finishes her hack and, after hitting the enter button, finally manages to disable the Seed 3 mother bot, as well as the other attack bots plaguing them all. Right after the collapse of the attack bots, Phil picks Jack up and gives him that much-needed boost, so he can get to Mary's level much faster. As Jack flies up to Mary's level, Phil makes sure to destroy all the L-Zone tentacles coming for them. Eventually, Jack gets to the end of the orbital shaft and walks closely to Mary. Soon, he breaks the protective cocoon, keeping Mary inside the core, and walks further in to see Mary unconscious and suspended inside some organic pod-like substance. Thereafter, he touches Mary and suddenly enters the trance Mary's consciousness is currently in, only to find her trapped inside yet another glowing circle. Without fail, Jack inches closer to her, waking up her consciousness, and touches her hand. As soon as their hands make contact with each other, a reaction occurs outside the cocoon that causes the L-Zone monster mass to crystallize altogether. With this, Wise concludes the war is over, and wonders what happens next. Moments later, after the crystallization is complete, Jack joins Phil somewhere on the orbital shaft, and apologizes for not turning the moon green with Mary this time. Even at that, Jack still tells him he feels at peace now that it's all over. As Phil concurs with his point, Mary wakes up, and Phil explains the situation to her. So far, the L-Zone monster is dead, and thanks to her, they can finally start a new beginning. While she takes that in, Wiz B, her favorite companion, shows up and jokes around with her. In time, the war ends, and Phil finally surrenders to the joint army. Before leaving the moon, he thanks Mary for the help so far and urges her to take care of Jack in his absence. Once Mary accepts his wishes, Phil gets handcuffed and walks through the army of guards to the secure vehicle. While on his way to hell, Phil wishes he could get out of prison in this lifetime, so he and Jack can be good buddies again and chill out like buddies do. Now inside the vehicle, Phil continues his soliloquy, but soon ends it with something weird about the revolution not truly being over yet. Eventually, the vehicle leaves and takes Philiosio to the Joint Army HQ in Nevada. When Reese and the other VC3 members get back to base, Reese and Clemenza both quit their jobs to become normal people again. During one of their last moments together, Reese asks Clemenza if he knows what will become of Phil after his hearing, but then Clemenza, who is now an ex-commander, says that there's no telling what might happen to Phil in the end, as they may not even get to see him again. With that out of the way, he asks Reese about her discharge, and Reese assures him that she's now ready to move forward. For his hearing, Phil is made to stand in Sapientia's meeting room, chained and surrounded by the elders, so they can discuss his crime and issue his sentence. Right after naming all the crimes he's committed against Earth and the Moon, Landry calls Phil Seed 2, and names him the final risk factor that Sapientia needs eliminated. Before letting them decide on his sentence, Phil asks them all if they think that the AI, Sapientia, hates humanity. In response, the fools say that the AI grew tired of loving humanity, as managing 15 billion humans must have been stressful for it. Unlike the intentional acts of humans, one of the followers calls Sapientia's methods a comprehensive response, and then tells Phil that all their troubles are going to end with his elimination. Having heard this, Phil chuckles and, after noting just how close he is to Sapientia, reveals his seed butterflies as his secret weapon. Before anyone can react, Phil frees himself from the restraints and has his butterflies self-destruct. To protect itself, Sapientia shoots several lasers all over the room, hoping to kill the butterflies, but only ends up killing Phil and its followers. In his final moments, Phil leaves the new world in Jack's hands and succumbs to his wounds. Sometime after the explosion that ended Sapientia, the Earth entered a great era of chaos with nobody to give instructions, but then the Moonchain warriors managed to keep the peace on the moon. 3 months later, Mary joins Jack on a random balcony in Copernicus and asks him if he's nervous about what he's about to do. Although he doesn't appear to be nervous, Jack assures her that he's not feeling that good. Eventually, the guy complains about returning to Earth and Mary quickly ushers him back in, as it's already time for the big event to begin. Around that time, Wendy walks into the VIP area and finds Zoan and Dwan chilling and eating some snacks while they wait for them. Although she freaks out for a bit, Zoan quickly urges her to calm down and ease up on them all as they'll be buddies soon. Just then, Salamandra and Harbinger walk into the room, and Harbinger somehow gets to be friends with Dwan without even talking to him. When they all get serious, Zoan expresses her condolences about Phil to Salamandra, and Salamandra assures Zoan that he still lives in their hearts. Soon after, Bob Skylum graces the podium and shows his face to every moon citizen watching him. Right before speaking, however, he changes his face to Jack and, while the people murmur, introduces himself as Jacob Shadow, tells them about his revenge mission to the moon initially, and gives them all a beautiful speech they can never forget. In summary, Jack tells them all the Moon King is no more. However, from then on, the moon will be ruled by every single citizen there. With all that said, Jack urges the people of the moon to avoid fighting each other, after which he chants the name of the rebel army, Moonrise, with the others. Soon after his speech, Jack returns to Mary, who says a few encouraging things to him, thanks him sincerely, and promises to make the moon rise again. The next day, Jack visits his buddy's grave, and while observing the minute silence, gets an odd friend request on his game from someone named Phil. In the final scene, Jack smiles at the pop-up message and accepts the friend request.